Council Rail Committee. It is November 18, 2022. And if Madam Clerk could take roll.
Yes, Madam Chair. Councilmember Cormack?
Here. Are we supposed to be using the microphones? I don't see the owl. Okay,
yes,
great. Yes, I'm here.
This is being televised on TV as well as through Zoom and YouTube. So, Vice Mayor Koo?
Here, thank you.
And Mayor Burt? For the record, 2 are present and we do have a quorum.
Okay. With that, we'll move to oral communications, please.
Yes, if anyone would like to make public comments for items not on the agenda, please use the raise your hand function and we will unmute you to speak for 3 minutes.
And just noting, we have one in person.
Excellent. Okay. So it looks like we have 2 members of the public. So why don't we take the in-person first? And I will screen share for the timer.
I have a handout. Maybe I can get that going first before I start here. I should have plenty for everybody here. You want? Okay, great. Maybe one for me.
It's 1 page.
Yeah, just 1 page. And I'm Elizabeth Alexis, or whoever wants to. Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. Pat, nice to see you made it. My name is Elizabeth Alexis, and I think today we're going to be talking about mostly Charleston Meadow. And I've put forward one of the alternatives, and I've sent some, I think, fairly lengthy comments in last time and this time. And I just wanted to highlight 3 points of those. The first one, and this is really a question for staff, just in my review of the traffic reports and analysis, and just my understanding of the intersection, I think we really need to ask ourselves whether we should even be considering any of the alternatives that basically leave the intersection as is, because when we're looking at how that intersection will function, it fails. And it fails today. It's almost basically a capacity, and any additional capacity that we would have, and this is about turn movements on and off Alma, would be filled up by what we call induced traffic. So it's hard to see whether this would meet any of the purpose or the intent of these projects, which would be to see improved traffic flow through these areas. I also think it would have long-lasting implications for the bikes and peds, where there are some weaknesses right now in our bike network, and I think you could never fix those. So it's really a question for staff, and I think it's something we should be talking about. Like, is there any foreseeable way to improve those? And the only thing I can think about is turning the intersections there into roundabouts. The second point is that I'm concerned that the bike community has really rejected out of hand the underpass. And I understand why they did that, because the way in which it's presented and the way in which the bike committee operates, usually they see what are fairly final designs and they react to those. And this really is a work in progress. And I think it's nowhere close to what it could be. And it goes from something that's really on the surface, the way it's presented is actually not appealing at all, to something where I think it would be really great. The last thing is a handout that I've given to you. And I think this is in a constrained situation. You have to start doing some really detailed work like this to kind of understand how different alternatives would perform. I mean, you have to understand how things are going today, and it's not just at an intersection, but really it's from an origin and a destination. Understanding today, is what percentage of the traffic is that kind of a movement, people going from A to B or B to C. Understand the grade, understand the travel times, understand the reliability, the elevation change, and then look at how things would change. And the people would change their traffic patterns, and then we're looking at the times would change. So this is the kind of tool I think would be very helpful.
Great, thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Ron Roth. You can unmute and speak for up to 3 minutes.
Hi. Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Terrific. My name is Ron Roth, and I live at 101 Alma Street, across the street from the Alma train crossing and very near the University Avenue Caltrain station. It's a wonderful location with Caltrain being nearby and very convenient. Unfortunately, the proximity of Caltrain also causes the frequent train whistle to keep me awake at night and interfere with my life during the day. I understand that the train whistle is no longer required for safety purposes. Elimination of the whistle would make life much more peaceful for my family, for the hundreds of people who live in the same building as I do, and the many folks who live nearby. I appreciate all your efforts to eliminate the whistle and encourage you to do all that is needed to achieve that result. Thank you very much for your time and your work.
Okay, thank you for your comments. The next speaker we have is Yvonne. You can unmute and speak to 3 minutes.
Hi, I live in Alma 101 Alma Street as well, and I have a high schooler. My son. We just feel very difficult to sleep since the train conduct until 12 a.m., maybe later than 12 a.m. at night, and it will start again 5 a.m. in the morning. So our apartment is very close to the to where the fence will lower. So it's not only the noise from the train, but also the whistle when it passes by, and also the noise from the fence to lower down and raise up. It all have the noise. So that makes it even more difficult. And we have only like 4 to 5 hours quiet every day. And it's not very good for young people growing up there. So I appreciate that. I heard that we have this project processing. So I'm grateful if we can reduce the noise in this area and let residents have a good night's sleep. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments. The next person we have is in person. It's Bruce Arthur. You can come up to the microphone and speak for 3 minutes.
Like that? All right. My name is Bruce Arthur. I'm here on behalf of the Palo Alto Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, particularly a subcommittee we set up to deal with rail crossings in South Palo Alto. I sent a longer email. Hopefully people have a chance to read, but I want to cover 3 main things that we've looked at and we have concerns about. The first concern was the most recent plan we saw that was a full underpass plan involved putting all the pedestrians and cyclists on one side of both Meadow and Charleston where they cross. We feel strongly that cyclists and pedestrians should have safe routes that do not require them to cross across Meadow and Charleston multiple times in order to get to their eventual destination. So that was item number 1. Number 2, we want to strongly recommend that the city of Palo Alto build a separated bike and pedestrian path in some area of South Palo Alto that would allow pedestrians and cyclists to move without having to deal with lots of traffic. So a separated bike path. We've seen the success of the Homer underpass in the California. I don't know how many people use them. We need some sort of mechanism like that in South Palo Alto. And then finally, we believe in order to get this construction project done, we need to make sure there's a safe crossing in South Palo Alto during the construction process itself. So that could be accomplished by adding a pedestrian bike crossing before construction begins for the roads, or by doing a piecemeal approach where we do one road first and leave the other road open for a while for bike pededs, and then sort of switching over at a time. So basically make sure that the construction process leaves us with good routes during the entire time. That's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your comments. And our last speaker is Adrian Brandt. You can go ahead and unmute and speak for 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Just occurred to me, I wanted to pass along that Caltrain, as part of electrification, will be replacing all the grade crossing circuit activation logic up and down the line because existing circuits are not compatible with electrification. So the chosen solution, call it 2-speed check or dual speed check. And what that means is that instead of the crossings activating based on this train speed, infinitely variable, so that the the warning time that the gates activate and stay down before the train actually arrives at the crossing. It will switch to being continuously variable or based on the train speed today to being based on one of two speeds, either maximum allowed speed, which is 79, or one intermediate speed. So the system they're going to is actually a downgrade in terms of gate downtime, because really, if a train is traveling anything less than maximum speed, we're going to see what's called an increased warning time. The gates will activate sooner necessarily because it only has one intermediate speed, and you always have to err on the side of safety. So if trains are traveling anything less than maximum speed, as they often do because of slow orders or other reasons, yellow signals, whatever, the gate downtimes are going to increase substantially. Caltrain also has planned a second round of signal improvements that they're calling the wireless crossing activation system. That should sort of make up for it. But there's going to be almost a year's time between the implementation of dual speed check and this other system. So I just wanted to let the rail committee and interested parties know that this is going to be being installed in our area pretty soon, like by the end of the year. And the current plans are not to install the wireless optimization, which will strive to kind of bring back the more precise activation times using a different technology until quite a bit later. And just as a point of interest, so far they've installed this dual speed check circuit at 6 different crossings, and the latest staff report to the board indicated that it ran into a lot of problems. They had a lot of complaints with gates being down too long or for no reason or whatever, and they deactivated it due to what they say are software issues. So they're going to continue trying to improve it. But what this means is we have some problems with excessive gate times in the interim. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Chair Koo, that is the last public speaker.
Thank you. Now we'll move to action items. Number one is verbal update on interagency activities from Caltrain, from VTA, and from city staff.
Thank you very much. Philip Kami, Chief Transportation Official, noting that we do not have any Caltrain or VTA staff present, so I'll be providing a city update. Continuing on, and apologies, did you say something?
I just said, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So continuing on with our seeking of grant funding, we're preparing to apply for the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, the TIRCP, which is from the California State Transportation Agency. It's upcoming, and so we'll be applying to that. We've initiated conversation with VTA on this application. Just to note that based on what we've heard previously from council, we plan on prioritizing the projects with Meadow Charleston as our first priority and Churchill as our second priority. We are required to prioritize these projects for this application. So I just want to note that. And also, of course, noting that we're using kind of a middle of the road approach for the funding that we'll be seeking, because we don't know which alternative we have selected or will select at the location. Moving on to the San Francisco Creek Bridge project, we've followed up with Caltrain staff in order to reiterate that we believe that they should be at least providing an alternative analysis for rehabilitation and strengthening of the bridge, and that we'd like them to perform a cost-benefit analysis for the alternatives. And we are waiting for a response from Caltrain on that request. The Caltrain corridor study, or I believe it's a different title, but their corridor-wide study on grade separations, Caltrain has hired Kimley Horn to perform this corridor strategy. Maybe that's the right title, corridor strategy. And the consultant's currently working on developing the scope and stakeholder engagement plan for this corridor-wide strategy. They recently were at the LPMG meeting this week, and they're looking into two separate areas: project delivery and program strategy. There's going to be monthly meetings with city county staff group and the LPMG, and they will be involving other stakeholders. We've requested to be members of the stakeholder group, and they're going to be developing their stakeholder advisory team, and we plan on providing our recommendations. And final update that I have on my list here is the quiet zone study. And I want to note that Ripon is working with Menlo Park and the consultant that's been hired for the quiet zone study for Palo Alto Avenue. And 2 diagnostic meetings are being scheduled to meet with CPUC and the Joint Powers Board staff. One virtual and the other one in the field to go over project needs, concepts, and preliminary analysis. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Philip. Mr. Kami. Colleagues, do you have any questions, comments?
Chair?
Yes, please go ahead.
So just a couple of follow-ups. Philip had mentioned that Caltrain has initiated this corridor study. They've engaged with a consulting team on it, and we've actually had 2 successive presentations at the LPMG meeting. And their approach seems to be very thoughtful and systematic. And then they've been very receptive to input in terms of including additional criteria and methodology for decision making and related factors. So I'm pretty encouraged that this is a good addition, that they're not just the concept of a corridor-wide study, but who they've engaged with seems promising. Related to the San Francisco Creek Bridge and our interest in Caltrain not moving forward aggressively with the replacement of the bridge preceding when we had an opportunity to develop our preferred alternative for not only Palo Alto Avenue, but how it relates to the station and other related issues. I've come to understand that several years ago, there was an extensive study of the El Palo Alto tree that was done by our former city arborist, Dave Doctor, and another gentleman, I think Nadia Nayak, give us more information on that. They had never quite completed publishing the study, and so they've been encouraged to do so in recent weeks. And my understanding is that that's coming forward, but that their study showed that even the root system of El Palo Alto is integrated with the bridge, and Caltrain's assumptions about what they could do on that bridge may be very impacted by those results. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that. And then we had our first meeting of VTA now has an ad hoc committee on grade separation. So Sunnyvale, Mountain View, and Palo Alto are the 3 cities on that. It was a really productive first meeting. And one of the interesting pieces of information that came out in the meeting is that on the area of where 4 tracks can have to be in reserve somewhere between South Mountain View and North Palo Alto is what we've been told for several years by Caltrain, and we've asked them to narrow that down. It came out that that they had already agreed to Mountain View's assertion that 4 tracks couldn't be integrated at the Castro station. And so all these years that we've been stuck on this issue in terms of where in Palo Alto it might exist, that stretch of possible locations has been reduced, and we never were told that it had been reduced. And I guess this can go to a question also to AECOM is, are you the consultant group also for Mountain View? Is AECOM consult? Okay, because this was all news to us and really important news. And I think it goes into us being more aggressive on taking position to Caltrain on the infeasibility. It certainly in certain areas of our corridor for track, because I think our case is at least as strong as Mountain View's was.
Thanks for adding that. Just want to note that staff also asked Caltrain about this issue that was brought up in that presentation by Mountain View regarding the forward tracking. So we've also pushed Caltrain on that a little bit, but we did not get any info really, frankly, about it. So still hoping to obtain more information about forward tracking and noting that that's a major issue for us.
Well, the way it was portrayed was that Mountain View submitted to Caltrain and we can ask for their documents, public record. So I think we should simply directly ask for what documents Mountain View submitted, and we can look at how that would compare to our assertions, and then we should simply go forward and make the assertions to Caltrain in a manner similar to what Mountain View had already done. And I don't think we have to ask permission to do that. But if we're not getting responsiveness, please let me know, because they should give us whatever information there is. Thanks.
Councilmember Cormack, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Okay, I have one. So, whenever documentation or requests from one city, especially one that can affect another, I think that perhaps we should be asking Caltrain that material needs to be shared with the other city or actually brought together so that we can have a conversation about it. I think if staff can iterate that to Caltrain, that would be something that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'll actually note that that's one of the things that we requested from both Kunle Horn and Caltrain staff, is that we're not doing these things in a vacuum, and that we're coordinating with all the cities and communicating.
Great, thank you. And does Ms. Nyack?
Yes, I was just going to add that the other thing that came out at that meeting was that Mountain View's City Council had taken the position of voting about the 4 tracks to send the message to Caltrain. So that might be something that we need to consider scheduling appropriately if that's something that the council chooses to weigh in on.
Thank you for sharing that. How would we weigh in on that? Can I ask staff and legal?
So I'm sorry, how would you weigh in on forward tracking? I think that's,
that's
something.
Do we have to make, Mr. Kami, go ahead.
Please go ahead.
I was just asking, so we're still waiting for information, but if this is something that Mountain View has already, my understanding is placing on their calendar in order to discuss and to put a vote forward and make a determination and submit to Caltrain, then we either need to speak to them sooner than later and start a conversation, or we need to put something on our calendar as well.
Yeah, I believe and Nadia and Mike might correct me if I'm incorrect, but I believe that Mountain View has already taken that action. So at this point, what we'd like to do is get information from Mountain View. So staff will be reaching out to Mountain View staff to determine what path they took to get Caltrain to provide them with a response, and potentially we could take a similar path.
Chair Koo, this is Councilmember Cormack. I wonder if we could just put that as an agenda item for our December meeting. That way we'd be agendized to have the discussion, and we could make a recommendation, if appropriate, that it go to City Council. And that would give staff sufficient time to get the information you need. And I see legal nodding.
Yeah, just noting that I believe what occurred in Mountain View, and this is a note that Ripon provided, is they've conducted a feasibility analysis, which is a step that we would need to take in order to have our council take action, I believe.
Well, we'd probably want council to weigh in on doing a feasibility study. So regardless, I think it makes sense to have a little bit more information next month and then make a recommendation.
I'm just, thank you for the suggestion, Councilmember Cormack, and, that may be the way to go. My only concern is how fast is Mountain View moving? Certainly we want to be moving at this in the same direction so that we're providing similar considerations to Caltrain and providing our home aspect as to the difficulties here in Palo Alto for Fordac. And certainly would want Caltrain to wait for hours in order to make their determination. So if time is a factor, then I want to be sure that we're moving along as well.
I think the time is a factor. Well, just noting that Mountain View is already moving forward with this, and I believe it seems, at least now we're still waiting for confirmation from Caltrain on this, but it seems Caltrain has already approved this for them, and their council has already approved that. So just noting this is all already occurred. I just want to note as far as timing, because I agree with you about timing. I think that it's unlikely that staff will be able to have a report by next rail committee meeting, December. Based on the fact that I think we have to have our reports done by next week. Is it this week? This week, yeah. This week we would need to have our reports done for that meeting because we're delayed here for this meeting and we have a holiday next week. So we've already got a lengthy item that we have scheduled for next month's meeting. But what we can do is we can provide an update at the next meeting from anything that we obtain from Mountain View and any information that we obtain between now and then.
Chair, and if we can just make sure it's agendized in a way that we can give direction to council or referral to council.
One more thing, Mr. Kami, so it seems like we're finding out things what other cities have done or have already come close to getting approval from Caltrain. Is there a way to kind of coordinate and get a timeline from maybe Mountain View or from Caltrain where they are in their approval process and what they have coming up for approval? So at least we would have information and we would be able to either reprioritize or even take another look at our planning to see where we need to be on a similar timeline. So Caltrain has both cities to consider versus just one.
Yeah, thank you for that question. We'll work with them to get their timeline. They presented this timelines, noting that they're significantly further ahead of us in their project. So just want to point out that they're significantly further ahead on us nearing construction here. So very, very far ahead of where we are in this project right now. So they, obviously things like feasibility. It's easier to do a feasibility analysis when you're that much further ahead in the project.
Can I ask a quick question? They're further ahead on Castro, but what about Ringsdorf?
Yeah, they're ahead on both.
But Ringsdorf isn't as far ahead as Castro, right?
Yeah, it's not as far ahead, but it is much further ahead than we are right now.
Yeah, I think for those of us who aren't on any of the broader committees, an attempt to sort of integrate the various timelines with the cities, maybe even I'm imagining on the corridor itself, so we could just see, I think would perhaps crystallize that, and it might be helpful for the community, right? Which usually has a lot of interest in continuing to reflect and analyze. So.
Just to note that the VTA ad hoc committee asked actually for a very similar thing.
Great.
So they're
Well,
asking for schedule as well.
Yeah, let's just use that then, but let's share it with everyone so it's not just available to some.
There's nothing that we're not sharing, but I do want to add that I'm not sure it's correct that Castro or the Mountain View is ready for construction because one of the things that they I believe said was that they're applying for additional funds and they're short on funds because construction costs are above what they had previously projected. So who knows how long Mountain View will take.
Yeah, I believe they're in final design.
Got it. But you can have final design and not enough dollars and you don't get to go forward.
I was just going to add that the last VTA ad hoc meeting. Maybe we can put a link to it on the next agenda for rail committee so that the public can look at it, because what they did at that meeting was they literally had Mountain View and Sunnyvale present the full alternatives, where they are, how much it's cost them so far, what their stumbling blocks have been, what their issues have been working with Caltrain. And those two cities have an MOU with Caltrain, something that I believe Caltrain's coming to ask us about next month. And it was very enlightening to hear the issues and the delays and how much money it's literally cost them, because Caltrain hasn't been able to be as responsive as the cities wanted and have missed out on a lot of funding opportunities. So anyone who wants to do a deep dive, I recommend. I'm not sure it's worth sitting through the entire presentation at one of our things, but it's definitely something I would suggest the policymakers try to watch before the next meeting when they come to ask you for an MOU, because it was very telling what has gone on, and there's question about whether it makes sense yet, given Caltrain's staff.
Can I just have a question? So, Mayor Burt is there. Are you there as well at that meeting? I really like the idea of sending that out to us in advance so we can review it also.
Yes, will do. I actually completely concur with Nadia on this. Very, very valuable presentations and understanding the timelines and everything, and also understanding the challenges that they've had in collaboration with Caltrain, being that Caltrain's planning to come and talk to us about this at the next meeting.
When I think about when asking about the timelines, I would like to be more or less comprehensive, but on the matters that have an impact on Palo Alto, decisions that are made or approvals that are made or requests that are made by Mountain View or Sunnyvale to Caltrain that could affect Palo Alto in what we can do, that's where I would like to see the timeline provided with emphasis, so that we are aware, and if there's a way to provide our own request, then we would have time to do it. The 4 tracks is a huge factor, and it will hugely impact Palo Alto, and we have more grade separations than the other city. So that would be prudent to provide, especially if we're going to send this feasibility analysis request to council. They should know about it as well. The rest of council should know about it as well. Is there any other comments? Okay, I don't see any head shaking or arms waving. So we'll go to, did I take public comments on this?
Not yet.
Madam Clerk, could we take public comments on the verbal update on interagency activities?
If anyone online would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand feature. And if anybody in the room would like to make a in-person public comment, please provide a slip to the clerk. Chair Koo, there are no requests to speak.
Very good.
Leslie, we have
study session.
It looks like
we have one member that would like to speak in person.
My name is Gregory Conlon. I've been on the rail committee in Atherton for 20 years. I've been through various exercises that you're going through now. And I thought I'd start out with the comment about your quiet zone. We do have one intersection that's quiet, and the other one has been committed by Caltrans to pay for quad gates on Watkins. So that'll be done, I think, in 23. I'm not absolutely sure, but I think the money has been funded. Pat, what is that? What's the group that Caltrans that funds? They funded 2 or 3 million for Watkins to put in quad gates. I don't know why it's that much, because in Orange County they put in 11 quad gates and for $1 million each, but that was 20 years ago, so it makes a difference. And I guess the reason I came is that I have been an advocate of grading the right of way from Palo Alto through Atherton, and I've I guess my experience, I was a president of the California Public Utility Commission for a period of time. And during that period of time, they put in a 20-mile stretch from the Port of Long Beach to downtown Los Angeles in a trench with three tracks. And it cost less than $2 billion. So that was 20 miles. So I'm overcome by the cost estimates today, but it's passage of time will do that. But I would certainly advocate that. I just think if you get a picture of the trench, 20 miles long, get the Highway Patrol has a helicopter and they could give you a video of that whole 20-mile stretch and you should see what they've done. And it's really amazing. And I don't know what you're planning at these three intersections, but I wanted to at least advocate a trench and all the way to Atherton. And, Atherton's not receptive to it either. I'm kind of out there by myself, but I've been there a long time. So I don't go away, at least intentionally. I don't know, Pat, is there anything else I should say? The Hoover undercrossing, is that what you're thinking of at the Churchill and Charleston?
Well, we have a couple alternatives. Actually, you'll get an update in a few minutes on Charleston. That's a discussion item today.
And it's basically an underpass?
A version of one, yeah.
All right, I think that's my message. If anything I can do to help the plan, I've been working on it for 20 years, so another year or two is not going to hurt. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Mr. Conlon. Okay, anyone else?
Nope, that's the last speaker, Ms. Chair.
Thank you so much. Let's go to the study session now. Study session to review comments received from various stakeholders to refine conceptual plans for partial underpass alternatives at Churchill Avenue and underpass alternatives at Meadow Drive and Charleston Road. It's continued from October 19th, 2022.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to be picking up, I believe, on the slide that we left off on at the last presentation. And I believe that Peter Stefano from AECOM. I'm sorry. Rippon. Oh, I'm sorry. Rippon will see, we practiced this a lot. Rippon's going to be taking over here and we'll be continuing the presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Rippon Bhatia, senior engineer. So tonight we will continue. Before we continue on to the next slide, we wanted to have a correction on correction on a previous conversation that we were having on the typical cross section at Kellogg Avenue with the trench section. And we thank you, the rail committee last time for asking a good question, and we went back and talked to fire department with some information regarding the minimum widths that were required for fire vehicle access as well as for fire protection to the nearby properties. So knowing that more information, we believe that the roadway widths that will be required in that cross section of Kellogg Avenue would be more than what we previously said. So Peter is gonna share that screen, share that exhibit and provide more details on that. Thanks.
Yeah, so the PDF you see here, the image here is what we presented at the last meeting in October. Show the 10.5-foot lane. And there's questions, hey, is this enough width? And we said, yes, it is enough width for vehicles to pass through. And as Rippon said, that after we met with the fire department on November 3rd, they requested this 10.5-foot lane be 16 feet to allow for a fire truck to stop in an emergency. Of course, makes sense, and be able to open their doors and whatnot. Because they said the mirror from the outer mirror to the outer mirror is about 10 feet. So they requested 16 feet for this lane, which would require some roadway widening and removal. I'm going to go to the previous slide here. Removal of this landscape strip and some of the trees. You can kind of see the differences there between the two.
And to add to that is this is the same width on Seal, Kellogg and or Churchill Avenue. So any treatment with the ramp or structure, pedestrian structure within the roadway will have the same impacts on all those three roads.
So just to put a final cap on that, so the 12-foot ped bike ramp is still feasible, but it would require additional roadway widening that would go into the landscaping strip.
Chair Ku, do you want us to ask questions as we go, or would you like us to hold them till the end?
No, I think if it's all right, I'd like to have you ask questions as we go.
Thank you. I think we'd prefer that.
Do you have
too.
a question?
Yeah. So the fire department requested, did they require or did they request?
It's a requirement. Yes.
Require. It's a requirement. Oh, 16 feet.
Correct. Minimum of 16 feet.
Okay. And refresh my memory about 12 feet for the ramp. That is best practice. That is required for the volume we expect at non-peak times.
So 10 feet is very basic minimum on a structures that is allowed by the state of California. 12 feet is recommended.
Okay.
And general practice in city as well as in other areas is 12 feet to provide for a bike, a combination ped pedestrian path. Yeah.
Can we go back to the slide? Apologies, I just think it'd be helpful if we go back to the slide where we initially discussed this. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So, oh yeah, okay, great, thanks. A big yellow thing. If I lean back, I can read it. Alrighty. So if we keep the 12-foot width of the below grade ramp and we do the 16 feet for the lanes on each side, it seems to me if we're going to lose trees, that argues for a steeper slope. We had talked last time about trying to extend the ramp further to lower the grade, right? But now we've got this other impact, which would be essentially losing trees. So at some point we'll need to account on how many trees, right? And if there's trees, we can't replant them. I don't even know. I don't even know what we would do there. And so even if we did 10 in the middle, it only gets us 2 feet on either side, right? 1 foot on either side. Oof. Okay. And I just want to be sure I understand. This Kellogg is the same width currently as Seal and what's the other one?
Churchill Avenue.
Churchill. So what are your guys' thoughts looking at this dilemma? Is there something that, you're thinking we should be sure to consider that we haven't discussed yet?
Well, I think the consideration that needs to be made is really, and noting this can always be determined at a later phase, but to allow for 12 foot, which would be more pleasant for somebody that's walking or biking in that tunnel, we would need to remove the landscaping strip. And so it's really weighing those trade-offs, yeah.
And to what extent would we want to or be required to take in the property owner's perspective, the people who live on that street and expect that tree to be there?
Yeah, I'm probably the wrong person to ask about this, but that's city right of way, is my understanding. So that is,
okay.
But I certainly think you would not do that without, community feedback. So,
and it's not like we put a shrub there, right? Like we just couldn't have anything there.
I think that would need to be looked at more closely, but I don't know there'd be room for.
We got a lot of microphones open.
Yeah, there would be no room because you need the clear width from that barrier to the curb line of 16 feet. The only opportunity to replant is to relocate the sidewalk further into the private property.
Oh yeah. Okay. Do you need? Are you just looking to sort of flag this for us? Do you need us to share which side we would land on, trees or bikes? Because that looks like a lot of fun to land on.
Well, so this is where it comes down to if we want to refine the concepts at this time, which was the council direction. This was recommendation that we received to widen the ped bike ramps. So this really comes down to, do we want to refine the alternatives further at this time to have a wider bike ped path, or do want to keep it as was originally
Which was
conceptually
10.
designed,
Okay.
which was 10.
Got it. Thanks.
And just to add, the difference between 10 and 12 and ramp, is it going to make a difference for the landscape strip now that we need 16?
Chair?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. So in addition to this issue, at the City School Liaison Committee meeting, days after our last Rail Committee meeting, the superintendent of schools raised concerns over the discussion on the landing area for this underpass on the Pali High School side. I'd say more than concerns, alarm and frustration. I'm not sure that they fully understood the alternatives on location, which we hadn't really flushed out, but there was a lot of consternation that we were talking about alternatives that would take land from them without having discussed it with them, and that they didn't think was feasible. It may be feasible, but this goes back to the other, for me, the overriding issue beyond this problem, and the problem on the other side is the questions I was asking last time on what bike riders does this location serve, and why would we be considering this location if just Seal or somewhere in that vicinity is a better location for serving the bike riders, to have a landing in Pierce Park, to have probably less issues on this east side, although perhaps still issues. I don't think we should be spending more time on this Kellogg option at all. I think it was a bad idea to begin with, and now we understand it's a worse idea.
So I appreciate those comments, but I just want to note that this issue exists at both Seal and Kellogg. And so we believe that we will be creating concepts for Seal as well as Kellogg, but just noting that this same issue exists at both, and also noting, as Ripon pointed out, which somehow I didn't get, I thought for some reason we could take one landscaping strip, but this issue exists regardless of the 10-foot or the 12-foot at both locations. There will be landscaping strip impacts for this, the length of the Pedbike tunnel.
And we confirm that Seal is the same width as Kellogg?
Yes,
okay,
that is confirmed.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Chair Koo, if I may.
Yes, please.
So a couple of questions. How did we miss this previously? Because it seems like this would have been a requirement. I also have questions about how does this work in Southgate, as I don't think they have 16 feet there. And so I'm not sure if this is a request or a requirement and what that means. Second, I will just say, going back to the original CSS concept, this is where you start talking about, do you have different sized fire trucks, and is it more cost effective to buy different fire trucks than it is to fix the city? But I'll digress. Last is the difference between Kellogg and Seal that we've talked about and that the committee raised is that on the corner of Seal and Alma, on both corners, you have an RM30 property that you don't have a Kellogg. And so we discussed the possibility of, if there had to be some land impacts, that you had the opportunity to design something that had less impact on the neighbors and also allowed the city to rebuild something else in that location that could potentially be added housing. So I just want to flag that that's one of the main differences between Kellogg and Seal.
Can I just follow up on this for a moment? Because I think if we go a little further on both, it may help the community eventually understand the benefits of whichever one we select. We're continuing to surface them even even today. So I would be hesitant to rule one of these out until we go a little bit further in the process. And I think there is, can't believe I'm saying this, some value in continuing to research both of them and come up with a top 10 reasons, right? Here's the reasons why, pros and cons, however it is we want to approach it. I think that will actually help the community eventually accept that it wasn't like we just picked something, is that we carefully evaluated a couple options and we came to the conclusion that this one was better because of A, B, and C. So that's my thinking as I listen to this discussion about, the eternal conflict between Kellogg and Seal.
And I do anticipate that we'll have more information available soon regarding the pros and cons of the two different locations. So just noting that we've made a request to PUSD for dot maps. We haven't received that yet, but that's something we've requested. I'm sorry, I forgot I was going to respond to something that I believe Nadia asked.
How did we miss this?
Oh, how did we miss this? Yeah, I'm not sure. So I think that part of the nexus for this consideration came from our car-free streets, where we're dealing with 16 feet requirements from the fire department. And to answer your question about whether it's cheaper to buy small fire trucks or all that, I think that's a whole another lengthy discussion. But we're having kind of the same conflict with the car-free street, where we're dealing with an emergency fire lane that we need to keep a certain width available, and it's more than transportation expected. And I will say that right now it's being considered as a requirement. That doesn't mean that that's not something that can be potentially negotiated, but right now we do not feel like we have any authority to do so.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I have one. So right now, the issues that we're looking at is on the east side of the Alma on both Kellogg and Seal. The issue on Kellogg on the west side would be the landing spot, which there is need for more information from the school district. For the west side of Seal, there should be no problem because that's the city of Palo Alto's land. Is that correct?
So I'll say yes, but I'll caveat that a little, because we would need to discuss with legal the implications of using parkland for a bike path. So we just figure out with legal if that has any implication regarding any needed rededication or anything like that. From my standpoint, it's not necessarily a complication.
Yeah, I believe Keith Bechtel, who's on Parks and Rec, addressed this the last time because they looked at this when they were looking at other things. So anything that is a bike pedestrian impact, if you will, on a park is considered an improvement of the park and does not have to go to a vote. But certainly Molly Stump should weigh in.
Thank you. That's exactly my perspective on this issue, but noting that I'm not an attorney.
Okay, so that's just a confirmation if we can get that. So it's another check that we have confirmed and we know for certainty. Yes?
Yeah, so that would be part of our consideration. But I just want to say that even if that were the case, if we needed some kind of, vote or rededication, I don't really see that as a huge hurdle. I don't think that that's really quite an issue.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm not there, so I can't be facial yeses and nos, and so that's why I'm asking for verbal. So I appreciate your patience there. And if there's nothing else, then we'll move on with the study session onto the next.
We can also talk about the item number 163 on our payback on the comments spreadsheet that Councilmember Cormack brought up at the end of the discussion last time. So we can discuss that and see how we can address that question. So I know that was at the last minute question regarding the design attributes as it relates to the peak pedestrian traffic or the signalized intersections. That was a question on the comment number 163, I believe, right?
Yeah, I apologize. I did not bring my detailed notes from last time. I don't recall that it was specifically pedestrian. I thought it actually addressed bicycles. But again, I don't have it in front of me. So if somebody has that comment 163, I think what was sort of buried at the end was this idea that we are not designing for the peak. And we need to surface that and agree to that if that's true. Because up until now, we've been talking a lot about there's so many kids on bikes, this time of right, where will they go? And if the answer is they're going to have to stack up in a line still, we need to be pretty clear about that and figure out where they're going to queue, as you all say, in transportation lands.
So usually a queue is built up at the traffic signals or like wherever a stop is kind of anticipated. And in the the different scenarios that we are looking, especially like partial underpass and these trenches, there is going to be a continuous movement. So there is wherever the traffic signal, like say if it's on Meadow and Charleston at the crossings that we discussed about, right now they are free flowing crossing. There's no, recommended traffic control measure, but that was one of the suggestion that was from our community, that we should look at either a hawk signal or RFB or some kind of improvement at that location, which we will be looking at. So considering those, if depending upon, we will prioritize bikes and pedestrians to have a continuous flow from there, so that they will have a minimum amount of stop time to allow for the accumulation of the traffic, pedestrians and bike. But if they do that, then they will have to queue in that bike lane that proceeds to that, generally like at any other intersection. However, through the tunnel, they can flow continuously. So they don't, there's going to be head space that's formed when you're traveling along a continuous pathway. So there's going to be so then the width of the infrastructure would be less of an impact throughout the structure, but it will be at the ends, like where they are stopped for crossing the roadways. Those are those locations where we would have it. We can look into the possibility of extra storage space to allow for that, but usually they are not designed to accommodate the anticipated bike, and there's a queue length that is anticipated, and then the walk time and don't walk time are allotted to accommodate that demand. Yeah.
Okay. So it's true that we're not designing for peak usage for bicycles.
So we have not done a study to know the exact amount of traffic, the pedestrian and bike volumes and on these corridors, but these congestion points will occur only when they are at the signalized or stop controlled intersections.
And apologize because I stepped away, so I might be stepping into the wrong conversation. But if I can explain this kind of layman's terms, what happens when you have a light, an intersection, is the bicycles all queued there, and then it becomes a big grouping. So you have everybody queued there, and then the light changes, and then you have this huge group. But when you have free flowing, because there's nothing stopping, there's not that same kind of grouping and queuing. So it happens more like it would on and anywhere else in a bike lane throughout the city or along the path.
Okay.
And hopefully I got the right conversation.
Yeah. So I guess the question is, should we be concerned, or is there something we need to communicate? I just think people are expecting this to sort of solve the, bikes bunched up problem. So either it does or it doesn't.
So, I'm sorry.
Mr. Kami, I saw Ms. Starlick's hand go up. I wondered if she had anything to share.
Sylvia.
Hi, good afternoon. I just was trying to help out my colleagues describe how the tunnel would work. I just wanted to mention that the Calif tunnel operates this way now. There's no traffic control immediately right at the tunnel entrances. And so people flow in and out of there. And there's not a signal light right there that's metering the big pulses of students that go through there. There are big pulses of students who go through there, but they're not getting metered by a traffic light.
I keep imagining a Python somehow. Okay, so
also noting that Calav Tunnel is maybe, although it's a good example for this, it's not the best example for how we would want to design, because it's got the width issues and all that. But yeah.
Okay, so maybe then we just need to rethink how we're answering this question, which isn't, we didn't design for this. It's that the design means this won't happen in the future. Sorry, that was a long way to get to. Okay.
That's right.
All right.
Okay. I don't think I see any other comments. Do you want to continue?
No, that's fine. And we can move to slide number 18 on presentation. Peter, you can continue.
All right, let's get started here on slide number 18. This is where we were talking about intersection layouts and design vehicle turning radiuses. All of our intersections were designed to accommodate a 40-foot bus, which mimics a garbage truck as well as a city fire truck. Some stakeholders suggested tightening up some of the curves to reduce pavement width. As you can see here in this graphic at Alma and Charleston intersection, we do have extra pavement in this area that it looks relatively wide, but is there in order to accommodate those turning movements. So our recommendation is to leave this conceptual design as is to keep that pavement width there.
What's the pink in it?
It's a shoulder. Oh, it's a sidewalk, sorry.
Okay.
Actually, I wanted to add a couple things here real quick. We had a lot of comments about this intersection. There were comments like, hey, this radius is so large, there's so much pavement, the vehicle can make this turn pretty a high speed, it's unsafe for pedestrians. One of the problems we're facing at this intersection is you got to think of this three-dimensionally. Let me see can you see my mouse there? Yeah, over here. This roadway here is lower than the Alma Charleston turning movement here. So there's a wall and a barrier right here. So we have to provide space for the the mirror and the tires from the fire truck to make this turn. This is why it's relatively wide at this location. Because normally, like if the receiving road was, let's say, 2 lanes, you could allow the fire truck to go onto the adjacent lane. But here we don't have that luxury.
It also looks like it's less than 90 degrees, right? Which doesn't look like a sharp right turn. We have this issue on, pardon the phrase, Ross Road as well. And it does require you to come out further to get around. Just looking at it, looks like it's an acute angle.
Yeah, it looks like you're right, a little bit more than 90. So yeah, it makes it a bit tougher.
So can I follow up on that? So I appreciate what you're just pointing out on this different elevations where it's coming out of the turn and can't overlap into the oncoming lane area. Is it not feasible? So we have, as you're going southbound on Alma and ready to make this right turn with a fire truck or whatever, is it feasible for that fire truck in those occasions to begin the turn from the lane to its left here that is designed to straight on Alma? And therefore,
yeah, I don't think we'd want to design for that, because that could create a situation where a car would be trying to make a turn on the inside of a truck or a fire truck, making the turn from that adjacent lane. You're saying make the turn from this lane here, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
that's the question. I appreciate it's not without potential impacts. I just don't know whether that's all feasible if we look at all the alternatives.
I think if you're looking at, if we're talking about like an oversized truck, for what reason, how to make this turn, they would probably do it like with a pilot vehicle from that lane. But as a general practice, we wouldn't want any vehicles making a turn from the adjacent lane.
Or straddling the 2 lanes. So if you have an oversized vehicle, it's not going to allow anybody, if it's straddling the lanes, it wouldn't allow anybody to go around the right or the left.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but I just want to make sure we're looking at options.
Yeah, just to add that emergency vehicle may have that kind of provisions, but like Amazon truck and buses and others, we don't want other.
Well, but we're talking here about a 40-foot vehicle.
This is a school bus.
Okay, but Amazon and those others
I mean,
are
they
not.
may, yeah.
That's my point, is that, so if we're having to have this kind of additional pavement going out there to accommodate the 40-foot vehicle, but not lesser length vehicles, then that's the issue that we want to focus on the design.
Yeah, this is for the school bus.
Right. And that's what's driving the problem, not an Amazon length. Yeah.
Well, so just to note, it's the 40-foot is the fire trucks, the garbage trucks, any of those larger vehicles that would travel. Yeah, moving trucks, anything that would travel in this.
Okay, thanks.
Nadia?
Yes. I don't have any. No, I guess I was wondering how wide is that at its most narrow point, at the top part of the diagram? I mean, is there, it's because we don't have sidewalks there and we don't have bike crossings there. I mean, there's no other wiggle room there.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're asking now, dear.
I guess what's the skinny, how that last bus movement? Yes, where Milette's pointing. What's this, how wide is it there?
Oh, I believe it narrows down to 14, 15 feet. I'd have to look. I can't recall.
With the
offhand.
shoulder?
Yeah, there's a curve. There's a curb and gutter there. I can't remember what we provided further to the east there.
Okay.
I think it narrows down to either like 12 between 12 and 15 feet.
And was there, I don't remember if there was some kind of rule of thumb that when you've got, when you're making a turn and there's a wall, like, so my understanding is when you have lanes turning near each other, maybe the rules are slightly different for design than when you're designing and there's a big wall. I remember we did this kind of on Churchill, that you had to have a little bit more clearance because cars behave a little bit differently when there's a tall wall. And so is that impacting some of the metrics here? Because it's at a different elevation?
No, not necessarily. Well, we try to lay this out and see, you can kind of see the mirror. It's a little bit hard to see, but there's a mirror on the side of the vehicle.
Yep.
I want to make sure that clears, any barrier that they're up against. So
Okay.
try to provide a little bit of room on the inside too. We don't want to try to design it so tight on both
Of
sides.
course, yeah. Great, thanks.
And also to add that, right, we will look at other measures that could be helpful for pedestrians and bicycles, like a landing area with different colors, some pavement, so as to give a visual for regular vehicles to stay in the lane. So
Technically on this corner, there will be no pikes and peds because they'll be in the, this is Charleston, right? So they would be in the bike ped crossing. They would be completely out of this corner. This corner is more akin to the turns that we have off of Oregon Expressway coming up onto Alma. It's more like that, where it's a no pedestrian, no bike zone. There's nobody that should be on the road.
I thought they said the pink was
Yeah,
sidewalk.
this is northbound Alma to eastbound Charleston.
Yes, but there's no sidewalk on this side of the street, isn't there? Northbound
Yeah, there is.
Charleston. Oh, I'm on the wrong corner.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
And so we'll look at some of those measures in the final design and then future phases.
That's a good segue to the next slide, because we talk about some of those improvements that we could make.
I was misinterpreting which direction this was too. So when we label these, can we include that says Alma Charleston, but there could, you knew which direction it was, we didn't.
It's in the yellow. It's in the little yellow box that says bus turning movement.
Okay, NB to EB. Got it.
That's great comment though. We'll try and add the directional arrows or the north, south, east, west.
Yeah, it's a good thing that I'm last because it took me a while to figure that out too. So I finally figured out, the one going straight up is Alma and it's turning onto Charleston. So yeah, labeling it would be good. But remind me, right now on Charleston, there is a lane turning left onto Charleston. So there is 3 lanes at that location already, right? It's just that now we've changed it in this diagram to be turning right versus the left.
I think that's correct. Yeah, the existing condition, I don't have the existing condition from it. Yeah, there's a left turn lane today, of course, to make a left, get over the tracks, but all those movements would have to then turn right here to go then through the roundabout. And then you turn back under the underpass.
And the ped and bike crossing for that location is going to be the underpass. But for people who are still walking around their neighborhoods, they would still require that sidewalk in the pink.
That's right, because there's
or would
homes.
like to have it.
Yeah, there's homes fronting Charleston here.
Okay, so and it doesn't have to be as big, but
Yeah, maybe I could go.
it's for a neighborhood. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, it's this turn right here. It's this turn right here that we're looking at. Rotated view, but you can see the homes here. They provide the access for pedestrians.
And over there, where it goes to the green bushes by the homes, that's also city land, right?
No.
Which, I'm sorry, which bushes are you talking about? Are you talking on the side?
Yeah, so they're precisely the, yes, this one here. So where the pink is right now, the sidewalk, is that on private property?
I believe there's a partial acquisition of private property here. I don't recall offhand, but I believe that's the case. Yeah, and I think even along Alma, there's a narrow acquisition. Actually,
Correct.
yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna have another exhibit here. I can pull up. Yep. Yeah, it's the partial acquisitions that are shown here in green.
Okay. Okay. So as we move forward and present on these kind of diagrams where there is potential private property impact, please provide that as well in your presentation.
On this, well, we show this sidewalk, and currently we have a very wide parking strip. I don't know how wide it is there, but it's exceptionally wide, and then a sidewalk. Does this consume both of those?
Yeah, it does. To minimize the amount of acquisition, we show removal of the planting strip on both Alma and Charleston.
And we had discussions about utilizing that. I don't know, what do we have, about probably 20 feet to the fences there from Alma currently. It's really all the way from San Antonio, I think, to East Meadow. That was potentially an off-road bike path. So we're removing possibility of that from this design as a result of this design.
Yes, that will be hard. Sorry, if that was the intent, yeah, that would be hard to accommodate in future.
Hard to, or
it will not be able. We will not be able to.
Okay, so I just think we want to make sure we have that on the table.
Yeah. It's straighter here. It's over here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. See how.
Yeah, that planting strip has to be removed to fit in the lanes.
So that strip of pathway, so it does have to go beyond the fence, or can that strip of the strip of landscaping is sufficient for the third lane?
Yeah, Councilmember Koo, this is where we're showing the acquisition. So the geometry must have worked out where we needed that space.
Yeah, but that's public property, right?
On the other side of the fence, yeah. So we're proposing the sidewalk be relocated, so it require to be relocated on the other side of the fence. So the fence line would have to be modified.
Okay.
Yeah. So the fence line would be relocated slightly to be on the back edge of this green swath here.
I see. Okay, I understand now. I was just thinking there's a very large strip over there of landscape in the public side. So I thought that might be what you were talking about, but
Vice Mayor Koo, we have a member of the public that would like to make a comment.
Hi, just quickly. So first we'd be getting rid of 2 left-hand turn lanes there, right? Because those left-hand turn lanes don't exist anymore. You can't make a direct left turn, right? So, I mean, can't you shift the road over there?
Yeah. So part of the reason for the shift of the lanes towards these properties because of the on-ramp that's coming here from eastbound Charleston on the southbound Alma.
So we could push that left turn lane, the right turn lane onto Alma, the turning one, because that's further over than what we have roads right now on the other side. So that could be conversation with Caltrain. So where you're making your right turn lane, it's happening.
Yeah.
Like there's space that we use right now on the other side for a lane. And would Caltrain consider us using that same equivalent lane so we could shift stuff over a little bit? And then I guess I have one more question, which is one of the concerns that people have is people are just going to whip around the right-hand turn from Alma North. And I know traffic engineers don't like this, but what if you did not have dedicated right-hand turn lane? You just made people wait in line there to turn? So
You're talking about this right turn lane?
Yep, just combine that with the through lane.
This
right.
This right turn pocket was recommended by our traffic engineer to go all the way back.
I understand, but I'm saying is there a possibility, I mean, is that set in stone or is that something that could be discussed? Yes.
I think it would bog down the intersection too much, but we could have the conversation with Gary Black. Yeah.
And I'm going to say this, and I'll let Ripon kick me if I'm wrong here, but I think regarding the other one, that could always be something that's, and I'm sorry, the other one meaning the shifting of the roadway more towards the railway. That could always be something that's discussed with Caltrain as this is further in design. Just noting that we believe that Caltrain is going to take an adverse position to giving right of way there in particular. So.
What's the yellow hashed thing in the middle here?
That's just a buffer between northbound and southbound Alma.
Okay.
How big is that?
I think it narrows down to about 2 feet. It flares out over here. We have a little more room nearby.
So that's a safety improvement over what we have today, right?
There was just a little bit of I'm trying to remember why that was created.
We don't. That's my point.
I think you have to align the left turn. There's an opposing left turn. Sorry, there's an opposing left turn, so you have to align the through lanes in the right direction. So when they're coming in the other direction, so there is that buffer that is created as a transition happens.
Yeah, I think Rippon's right. I think it had something to do with lining this up across here.
Okay, but is it a physical barrier or is it paint?
No, it's just painted
Like
stripe.
It's like what's kind of currently there.
Oh, okay. All right. It seems more exciting.
So I think that the presentation, especially with the northbound Alma making the right turn onto eastbound Charleston, the way that it's configured, it's best when presented to explain that there is some acquisition of private property. And if there's no more comments, we can move on.
Okay, this is slide 19, and we received some suggestions about safety improvements for bike peds at the intersections. This is the Alma Charleston intersection, we think is a good candidate, and this is the same one we were talking about in the previous slide. And we also have a sample of an intersection that we did on a San Mateo project that allows for shorter crosswalk lengths, but also accommodates the turning movements that you would need for the design vehicles by using some mountable curbs. So as you move into the next phase of the design, we could consider, incorporating some improvements like this to help with some of the pavement width and make those crossings shorter for pedestrians.
Councilmember Cormack?
Yeah, can you go back to the buyer
Minister?
slide? It's a little hard to in our written slides. Okay, great. And then there was something about 4 feet somewhere. Okay. All right. And so the new slide 19, which, okay, now I'm confused. Is just, you're showing us an option for that area, the concept?
Yeah, so this is a sample that we did on another project. This isn't meant to show what we do exactly at this location. So this.
Okay, so the general problem is we have a long place for people to get through. Okay, so
Exactly.
now if you can go to that one that has an awful lot of stuff on it, that'd be great.
This one?
Yes. Okay, and so just verbally, the things that you do here was essentially a shared space. Pedestrians could be on it when people aren't driving around it. Is that brown and gray part, pedestrians are allowed to be there or not?
No, this. You want to go, Rippon? Start explaining this one.
So this is an example for another location and for a similar situation, but it's not the exact location. We will do something similar, like if you go back to the previous slide, please, to the right. So like where that 40 feet is, we could use that area as a mountable curb so that the fire trucks and the buses it will be easier for them to mount, but it would be like a brickwork and give a clear distinction so that generally the car traffic will be able to stay closer to the curb, and then that gives some larger kind of a standing area for pedestrians, and it will also shorten the crosswalk so that they don't have to cross that bigger distance, even though if it was an emergency vehicle or a bus, they would use that land area, but then they will be like a more mountable for these larger vehicles, but not for the, it will give a feeling of constrainedness for cars.
So essentially curb gets modified and.
Sorry, we're still talking about the pink part?
Yeah,
Okay.
the difference between the pink and red. So we could tighten up that curb line. And I'm gonna go to this next slide here, so that this red area could be used for the larger trucks. But for a regular vehicle, like just a passenger car, they would make a tighter movement and again, allow more space and a shorter crossing distance for pedestrians. This is what they call these.
Okay, so we're getting awfully far down in the details.
Right.
This seems to me like a treatment that we would apply at some point.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, so do you need a lot of input from us on
That's
this?
actually that's actually staff's recommendation, is to consider this type of improvement at a future stage of this planning.
Okay.
And one more thing just to add, because this one mentioned, is that also for most vehicles, having that additional apron that they wouldn't mount there will slow the regular cars that are making that turn down, so make it feel more comfortable for a pedestrian.
Okay.
Yeah, we wanted to dedicate a slide to this because there were a lot of comments on this intersection.
Okay.
Just want to
Any
confirm
other-
before we move on, any other comments on this? No.
No, thank you.
All right, slide 20. So we've received a lot of comments about the grade of the road. This is shown here as the Charleston profile. We show it come down at 12%, going underneath the tracks and under Alma, and then climbing back up at 10% before it comes back to grade just a little bit west of Wright Place. Keep in mind this 10 and 12% is a maximum, so it's really more of at a point location or a short distance, but that's what we'll show as the maximum grade. So we received a lot of comments about trying to either flattening out these grades to make it more suitable for bicyclists to travel on. But we've also received the opposite comment, if you will, about steeping this even more to reduce the footprint, to reduce the cost, to reduce the property impacts. So we took a look at various considerations here to do that. So this is what we would do to flatten out the grade at 5%. So this would make it a little bit easier for bicyclists to travel on. As you can see on the left side of the screen here, the limits of the roadway would extend much further to the west, well beyond Park Boulevard, a couple hundred feet. So that would mean more impacts to the properties, to the driveways that front Park Boulevard. And then we also took a look at steepening the grades. So
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go
Is
ahead.
purple the actual design and the other colors are the modifications?
Right.
Okay.
Sorry, that's,
All together.
yeah. No problem. Yeah, this is a little confusing. So yes, the purple is based on what we currently show on all the exhibits. And maybe I should take a step back. When we get together with the city before we start to lay these out, one of the first things we do is what design speed we want to design this road for. So based on, and we chose 25 for Meadow and Charleston. And based on that design speed, we look at trying to minimize the cost and minimize the footprint for that design speed. And this is what we come up with. So this purple represents the minimum footprint for 25-mile-an-hour design speed.
And just so you know, the paper slides have all the colors on them. So it makes much more sense when you do your builds, but I was following on the paper slide. So apologies. I was like, what?
No
Now it
worries.
makes a lot more sense with when you build it. My apologies.
No, that's okay. No, I understand. So, again, it's a fair comment. What would happen or what can we do to make these grades flatter to make these more suitable for bicyclists? So we showed it here. We still need to get under the tracks, of course, but we could flatten out the exit grades, if you will, the entrance and exit grades to the sag curve on the bottom. There's no,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is there, can we flash back to the aerial of this so that I'm trying to recall where the bikes and peds are going to be in this?
Actually, this is for roadway, bike and peds are separate.
Well, but the 5% I thought was being talked about for the bikes.
Right.
So is that the
So there's
but they have their
various-
own.
So we are looking at different alternatives because the one which is proposed as a part of the original design is 10 to 12%. So payback and other CSTC brought us comment about having it to flatten it. And then there are other comments from other engineers who were like to even.
Well, and this is, but what I'm trying to understand is are we on this design saying that the bikes and peds are going on the same slope as the vehicles?
right. So there was a lot of comments from stakeholders saying, okay, it's fine to have a two-way bike path on one side of the road. Well, I mean, there was comments about that, but that aside, they wanted to make the road itself more accommodating for bicyclists. That's why they asked.
Okay, so this is what I'm trying to make sure I'm understanding. So we have bikers who will go on and are allowed to go on roadways.
Right.
And then we have bicyclists like the kids who we're wanting to have off the roads. And I'll just say I'm less if we have the separate bike route for kids, then I'm not so concerned about accommodating bikers who choose to go on roadway. They're serious bikers and they don't have the same issues as the kids. So that's what I'm trying to refresh myself, because when you're talking about it for the bike slope, I'm going, wait a minute, I thought we had the kids separate, but I'm also trying to recall here, what is the slope that we have for the bike and ped ramp? Is that the 5%?
Just to acknowledge what you're saying, for Vice Mayor Ku's information, since she's not seeing my head shake, that is what they were referring to, is the vehicular cyclist that might choose to use the roadway.
Exactly. So we dedicated a slide for this because there were comments on both sides of the issue here.
I just want to make sure we weren't confusing those two.
No, not at all. No, it's a fair point. And you could see here, this slide or this image here shows what the grade would be for the two-way bike path. It's grade less 5% or less. Okay. Let's go back to this. Okay. There we go.
That's starting to make sense.
So the purple, again, it shows, you saw the purple limits that I just showed on that other exhibit, that matches this profile. Again, we started with the design speed and we're going to try to make it as economical as possible based on the design speed. And this is what we come up with.
Question again, just for us to have visual reference points, are there some other nearby examples of a 10 and 12 foot, 10 and 12 degree grade?
12%, yeah. I don't know of any. I know Jefferson Redwood City is 8%. Embarcadero is at 6, 5 and 6%. I don't know
What's
of
Oregon?
any. Yeah, I'm not sure about Oregon. I was thinking that same question though.
Oregon will be pretty steep on the west side.
I'll try to get an answer for that because I'm kind of curious myself. I think it'd be helpful for everyone to kind of get a feel for an existing road that does that. I mean, again, so this is what 5% looks like, and then we, on the other, on the flip side, we looked at how could we go steeper, and if we go steeper, that means a lower design speed. So this orange profile is for 20 miles an hour. I mean, it makes sense, for you to kind of climb down so quickly, for it to be safe for a vehicle, you'd have to travel more slowly because you don't have as much sight distance ahead of you to see, but ahead on the road.
And the primary advantage of that would be reducing construction impacts and potentially costs.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So it would, the benefit is it reduces the footprint, the overall, likely the overall cost, or what have you.
It also reduces the speed at which cars are going when they're coming out from that underpass and meeting up with bikes and pedestrians that they can't see. So part of the discussion that we had at XCAP was you're forcing everyone to go a little bit slower, but that's actually a good thing because you're coming up in a pretty heavy bike ped area generally anyway, right? On either side. And so there is an advantage of that. The other thing I was going to ask is, Peter, is there any indication that this number would get better if you change the bridge thickness assumptions that you've used, like M2 and M1 or MT2 and MT1 are the tracks, correct?
Yeah.
And if you use a thinner bridge deck, then that saves you a few feet and every foot helps the distances here.
Yes, that's correct. Basically, if we use a shallower structure section, everything kind of on the side gets lifted up, and then the conform points on each side get tucked in a little bit. The grades will probably get it slightly flatter too. So yeah, they're all tied together.
Do we have a sense of, okay, using the bridges, the thinnest bridge deck that we know that's used along the Caltrain corridor is suggested now going forward, how much we might save as a result, because this number gets impacted by both of those.
Yeah, it's, if you're talking like 6 inches to a foot difference, it's not going to make a huge difference. If I were to lay out, like I said, for a foot difference, but in the bridge deck thickness, you wouldn't see much of a difference here.
Also, I'd like to add that when we are looking at federal grants and other grants from the California state, they want like us to make sure that our design speeds are matching with those guidelines and requirements from the feds and state. And usually going below 25 miles per hour could also jeopardize some grant funding. Second thing is that the slopes, the 10 to 12%, the fire code requires 10% maximum slope. Anything above that would require an exception. So we might have to go do that exercise as well. So those two caveats to the greater slopes.
That sounds like a requirement, not a request.
And then lastly, even further to the extreme for a even lower design speed. Actually, this starts to get maybe less economical because when I drew this out, you could see how that's dimension of 16.3 now is becoming larger. It's because just the way the sag curve and the grade to meet this grade, we have to dip down a little bit further. It's a little bit counterintuitive maybe, but that this actually becomes a less economical design, but it does bring in the conform point closer to Park Boulevard, which was really kind of the impetus for this request to take a look at what if we steepen the grades. So again, showing all the colors together, this is, you could really see the difference here between the black and the I think the orange. Where's the purple? I think the red and the purple are on top of each other. So as the grades get steeper, the sag curve gets lower and lower. Yeah, that makes sense. I just to add on to what Nadia said. I mean, she makes a good point. This, if you have a sharper crest, the vehicles will tend to slow down, but we would not recommend going with the lower speed and steeper grades because you always get that driver wants to like whip through here pretty fast. So reducing the sight distance creates an unsafe situation for for kids crossing the street here. You know, you could get a vehicle coming out of the set curve, you know, at 45 miles an hour. And if there's not much sight distance ahead on the road, that's just not a good situation. So we're recommending that we keep the profiles as is because it provides a balance of design, speed, safety, and cost.
Can you back to the purple one? I don't have the numbers on paper slide and I want to write them down. Okay, 10 and 12. Thanks.
Is it permissible for me to add?
I'm sorry. I didn't hear that. It was off microphone.
Vice Mayor, could we have a request from a member of the public to speak?
Oh, I see. Yeah, go ahead. And please say your name before you speak.
I travel this route 3 days a week. And Charleston is the worst intersection of all of them. The traffic there at 8:30 is unbelievable. They got 100 bicycles backed up. And I don't understand, where is the train? Is that the top line? And what is the slope? Is it?
The train is shown where it says MT2 and MT1. Those are the track designations. Right there.
The train is at grade?
Yeah, the train is at grade on a structure.
And the underpass is that like what is it, Homer?
No, this would be more like Embarcadero, where the road goes underneath the tracks. Or Oregon.
And where do the bicycles go on the slope?
Yeah, it's a little bit complicated, but there's another exhibit showing where
I can see it
pedestrians
better.
and bikes would travel. It would be it'd be separate pathways
Where's the
from the
street,
road.
Charleston?
This is posted. Charleston comes this way. This is the,
So you got an underpass.
yeah, we can do this on.
I see. So the train stays at grade.
Yes.
Thank you.
And the public speaker is Mr. Gregory Conlon, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay. And if I might ask, so this is the design that staff is recommending. The 25 miles.
Optimized.
Yeah, so staff is recommending to keep the design speed at 25 and 35 to have the balance of the speed, safety, and cost. In other words, to keep the conceptual design as is, not to increase or decrease rate.
Thank you.
And noting
Is there
at
any
least
other-
at this phase of the conceptual design.
Very good. Is there any other questions and comments? If not, then let's continue to the next.
We received several comments from stakeholders about signage. Some of these pedestrian and bicycle routes are a little bit circuitous, may be confusing. So we acknowledge that would be a design consideration, but we're recommending we don't, go into any level of detail on signage at the point, as that won't help us decide on alternatives, but we do acknowledge that it's an important part of the design, and we recommend developing these in more detail in subsequent phases of the project.
And we can, unless you have any questions or comments, we can keep moving here.
My only comment on this, I agree that we done at a later phase of the project, but in general, it's so much easier for people to recognize images. They're so much faster at that than words. So for example, on the top, where it says pass left, keep right. Oh, people are walking, people are biking, people are so much faster to recognize that than down at the bottom. keep left, right, like, what am I supposed to do now? I have to find the bike, whatever. So just in general, I think those signs that have the large image and the smaller words are probably easier for people who are moving at speed to absorb. Again, this is just, based on how fast, we process images versus words. So again, agree that should be done later, but in general, I think that would be better, especially for, our kids who are, not, it might be a little bit slower to read.
Absolutely.
Mayor Burt? Mayor Burt, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay.
Oh, if you don't have any questions, excuse me.
Please go ahead, Vice Mayor Koo.
Oh, okay. Thank you. On roadway signage, so these are all signage that is on poles, correct?
Right. It could be on poles. It could be mounts to the side of a bridge. But yeah, generally they're on wood posts.
But not on the ground.
I think this
But
is
not
just
on the ground.
acknowledging that we would do a detailed design, including signage at a later phase.
Okay. And I would like to just have you also consider that some of the signage needs to be on the ground, because I do notice some of the bicyclists, they do look down a lot, and there's forewarning perhaps that could be on the ground as they're riding up towards the intersection. So if you take that into consideration, discuss that with the bicycle and pedestrian group, that'll be great.
Yeah, that's a great point. We do the design of these facilities. We try to design for pavement markings as well. That's important, because as you mentioned, sometimes there's looking towards the ground, they may not even notice the sign up ahead on.
Thank you.
All right, next slide, 22. Some of the stakeholders expressed a concern about the loss of the landscape strip, as we had mentioned earlier today. So the loss of the landscape strip next to the road, this in general make it less safe or comfortable for pedestrians and bicyclists. So just as an example here, this is the an existing condition looking north on Alma towards Churchill. And the proposed condition for the partial underpass of Churchill removes this landscape strip to accommodate the lanes on Alma. So you could see it here where the sidewalk is right up against the lanes. There's no buffer between the sidewalk and the travel lane. It's just separated by that curb and gutter. Again, similar to what we talked about at Kellogg Seal.
Would we have a rail or something there, even that's just nothing? Because why?
I'm sorry, a rail where?
Or a fence, or I said, right, just like some kind of little border between the sidewalk and the.
Yeah.
Typically, it is a contiguous sidewalk situation, and if there is a desired rail, then for bikes and other things, we would need additional clearance, and that would require some additional widening of the sidewalk.
Where would the bikes be?
Because bikes and pedestrians, if they're using the sidewalk.
Well, so we have ADA requirements, bike and ped requirements in order to allow space. So essentially what they're saying is to create that, yes, it's possible, but it shifts everything else. So everything else shifts over. And so if, say, for example, the barrier takes a foot, then you need another foot on the other side.
Yeah, I was going to add another concern about that is that space is used for the recycling bins. So that creates a challenge if you have some kind of railing there.
Getting a headache just from thinking about all this. Can't believe you guys do this all day, every day. I guess the one thing to think about with this is that, yes, we're going to have like a landscaping impact here, but if you go to that next slide, all the landscaping is going to be gone on that side, right? This is a major transformation, and this is just part of the landscaping that's going to be lost. I actually think that's a subhead of all of this work that we're doing that we probably need to be signaling in advance. We're talking so much about traffic and things, but this is a major visual change for people. Okay, so I guess I would be interested if we really expect people to walk there. I think there needs to be some, even if it's only a foot high, some sort of visual thing so people feel a little bit safer, even if technically they aren't.
So that's a good segue. That's the direction we're requesting is, should we accommodate some sort of buffer?
Oh,
there you
I
go.
could read ahead.
Sounds like you're on board with that. But yeah, that's the question we're asking is, should we modify the designs and the layouts? On Alma, it's a little bit tricky because the frontage, there's not much frontage, I should say, between the house and the curb. But, you know, maybe a foot or two that probably is doable.
How long
would be challenging?
How long, what's the distance that this condition exists? I mean, is this a block? Is a mile?
Yeah, for the, let's look at the Churchill underpass real quick. I want to say it's a few hundred, several hundred feet, but I can measure it for you.
Okay, it's not a super long distance.
So it'd be from,
Well, I guess it's football.
it'd be roughly from a little bit south of Coleridge to a little bit north of Kellogg. So that distance is about 1,200 feet. So it's at about a quarter mile.
Yeah, don't have any data. My gut feel is it'd be nice to have a even if it's a low, barrier, it would also serve as a visual for the cars driving. So close to that. That's my thought on that one.
I mean, they do have the curb and gutter there too, right?
Right.
Yeah, but it's not a visual. That feels like I can pull up in Park, right?
Right.
So one, and I'm not sure if you were getting at this earlier, is that if you have a fence that is elevated, bike handlebars, then if it's just short curb, it doesn't impact that.
So just to reiterate, though, I think the bottom line is there are right-of-way impacts from this decision. So just noting that. And yes, I completely concur with what Mayor said about the handlebars. We want to be really cognizant of that. If anytime implement any type of barrier, we want to be cognizant of any conflicts with the bike handlebars.
I guess I'd view it less as a barrier and more as a visual, like deterrent type thing. So it certainly could be low. I mean, again, I think this is unusual. Are there other places that people have done this where we expect people to walk along there?
The cities at 35 miles per hour. In other cities at 35 miles per hour, the contiguous sidewalks are somewhat
right next door.
Yes.
No, nothing.
But yeah, it's not preferred.
I'm sorry, I can think of one in Redwood City, and I don't remember which street it's on, but I do remember one in Redwood City.
We actually have a little sample of it on the Embarcadero Bridge. So when you're on Alma and you're coming from South Palo Alto and you're going towards downtown and the bridge narrows, there's a moment on the Embarcadero Bridge where you've got a sidewalk and the barrier that looks over to the underpass below at Embarcadero, and the cars are going through. And that's it. And so that's an example of what it's like to drive. Now, that's also the point.
But how often do people walk there?
Not very often. And I don't know that people walk in, if that happens to be my neighborhood. I mean, people don't usually walk on Alma. It's kind of loud. You'd walk on Emerson Street. But I will note that right now, what happens is just as you go over Embarcadero and start to enter the downtown area, the speed dropped 25 miles an hour. So one potential design solution could also be to say, starting at basically Northern California Avenue, you could slow the design speed. You can have them slow down to 25 miles an hour starting a bit earlier. That actually helps you transition into just a more narrow area. One of the big things that we argued about selecting the Churchill underpass versus some of the other alternatives was the narrowing of the bridge is actually a design thing that we wouldn't necessarily design today, but actually is a great buffer to slow people down going to downtown. And so we could do something similar, getting into the downtown, into that whole neighborhood area as you kind of get into downtown.
Okay.
I can, so that goes into one of my questions. First, there are curb cuts here. So We can't have a continuous, even low barrier. But then we have the sign as you're going northbound on Alma, right around Kellogg, that says 25 ahead. It doesn't become 25 until that bridge, but it does bring up the question of whether we should reconsider the 25 zone.
Yeah, I think this is where Nadia was talking about.
No, unless they're gonna hang sign over for that. Yeah, she can hear.
Sorry for the,
Yeah, I was just
I
saying.
was just say, I've never seen anybody walking there, I don't think, maybe in
No, it's kind of a
25 years.
I was gonna say dead man zone, dead person zone, but the only people that hang out there is the people that hang the banners that you see below. Right? That's the only time I've ever seen folks there.
Rip and I have both walked there.
Once.
So what is the width of this sidewalk
It's,
approximately?
it is 5 feet.
Oh, wow.
That
Okay.
is the existing sidewalk.
And I think that, when we're doing something, we need to kind of also consider ADA, right? That wouldn't be ADA compliant, no.
Yeah, it is ADA compliant. It's not an
It
ideal. It is, yes.
Oh, okay.
I believe for ADA, they have to have 36 inches of walking width.
Yeah, at a point location, I think, that sounds right. 32 or 36 point locations, but I mean, generally we'd want a width of, 6 to 8 feet, but I've seen 4 to 5 feet pretty commonly done in constrained areas. In fact, I'm out there with the tape measure in front of my own house because there's a sidewalk just like this, although the travelways, there's room for parking, so the street's a little wider, a little bit lower design speed, but it's a 4.5 foot sidewalk. I mean, it's fine, but it's not ideal.
And even in the sidewalk, it's not flat. It actually slopes a little bit towards the street, right?
Right.
For
drainage, yes. Usually like 1.5%, 2% maximum slope towards the street, toward the gutter.
Right, okay. Yeah, for a new, I guess if there are young children still uncertain on their bicycles, they really should be encouraged to use them, Emerson then. That would not be an ideal place for them to be learning to ride bicycles or be a beginner. But okay, so does the council members have any direction to provide?
Sorry, Chair Koo, are you asking if staff needs something from us or if we want to say more?
If you want to say more, or if staff needs something from us,
Yeah, so
does staff need any?
Yeah, I guess the decision we're trying to make is whether we should further refine the concepts to include the buffer between the back of the curb and the sidewalk.
So my answer would be yes.
My answer would also be yes. It's not apparent to me, though, that needs to be determined at this stage in the process. So is this just feedback you're already responding to that we would? I'm trying to figure out, is this going to help us decide which alternative to choose? I don't think so.
So that's an important distinction. So right now we're looking at refinements that we can make to this in order to help council and rail committee and ultimately council make a decision about alternatives.
Mhm.
And so we are directed to further refine those concepts. And so I agree with you. This is something that could be determined at a later phase and often would be determined at a later phase. But if the rail committee believes that this would be helpful for that decision ultimately, then this is an opportunity to refine the alternative to include that.
Personally, I would prioritize this far below the other discussions we've been having about how bikes get across from east to west. Those to me seem highly relevant to any decision that council makes about which alternative. This seems to me like a detail of one alternative that I trust we would handle at a later stage in the process. And I would certainly like us to consider the option of some sort of, I guess, buffer, better word than barrier at that time.
I would note that you guys already selected this alternative. So the difference about Churchill is you already chose this alternative. So you're making a refinement of a design you already selected versus the ones from Meadow Charleston where you still have the trench and the hybrid.
Although I see Charleston Meadow similar up here. Just trying to follow all. It's like we need a code to which one we're doing.
Yeah, I just agree. It's not a big issue, minor design. But I'd favor some sort of a buffer.
Yeah, I would say further refinement towards a buffer as well, just to provide more safety. Okay, if there's nothing else, then we can go to the next one.
Okay, thank you. All right, slide 23. This is about, we received a lot of stakeholder comments about the 2-lane roundabout here on Charleston. One of the concerns is that this is a little bit challenging for bicyclists to traverse through. And some have asked, and we've heard this before too, is that can a single lane roundabout suffice at this location? And we understand the question, because I think a lot of people visualize what the traffic out there today. There's not a ton of traffic on Charleston. Why is a 2-lane roundabout needed here? So to be clear, if you go back to the Alma Charleston intersection, so all of the northbound traffic that makes a left over the tracks and all the southbound traffic that makes the right turn over the tracks, all those movements would have to come through the roundabout to get across the tracks onto the El Camino side of the tracks. So for that reason, our traffic engineer looked at the volumes, looked at the movements, and is recommending a 2-lane roundabout at this location. So we are recommending, let me see if I have it. No, we're recommending to perform a more detailed review of the roundabout geometry to maybe refine the diameter slightly. That may be possible. We also were proposing to widen the bike ped path on the north side of Charleston here, in this area right here where my mouse is, to make the connection to the crosswalk at Mumford a little bit easier. So those are the refinements that we were recommending.
So I'd like to add into that is that we received an email from a member of the public, Elizabeth Alexis, also this morning regarding extending this bike path to the next intersection, which is Carlson. And there's always a way to extend it. It's just going to widen the sidewalk area, but then remove the landscaping strip. So similar challenges, but like right now we are recommending only up to Mumford because there's a pedestrian crossing and that can be provided more controlled.
So that would be a safer one.
Excuse me, I didn't hear the last part. Ripon?
Yeah.
So member Alexis, Elizabeth Alexis also recommended that we extend the bike ped path on the north side further east from Mumford to the Carlson intersection, because Carlson is a traffic signal controlled intersection, which will provide much more safer crossing for peds and bikes.
Is it possible for somebody to pull up the map of the area there? Just the Google map? And I would say that I have always assumed that the bike ped path will go all the way down to Carlson, and we'll see where that is and why that is. So this is one of the reasons why I thought it was an interesting opportunity to do kind of this, these paired one-way crossings, one on Charleston, one on Meadow, and one on Meadow, because there are no curb cuts at all. So it's actually a great place for a two-way bike ped path. Right place in the design is going to be not open to cars. But so it continues down, it's very wide, and there is also a planting strip in the middle. So you wouldn't necessarily need to use planting strip on this, something would have to be redone, but you could continue down the road. So some people would want to leave the bike path on the right place because we're going to someplace, in the circles, but you could continue down this and continue down. Like there's 4 or 5 houses on the other side, but unless your destination is there, most people would be going at least to Carlson Court anyway. Are we at Carlson?
Yeah.
Turn the other way. I think we're going the wrong way now. You keep going, and there's a light right there. So if you need to turn to the other side, there's actually a crosswalk and a light. And then just beyond that intersection, we already have actually a 2-way kind of bike path on the sidewalk there, because there are kids who are going from there to Hoover Elementary and connects directly to the Waverly bike path. So for anybody who wants to get to the other side or go to Green Meadow or something, you'd have a crossing right there at a light. And I don't think I would ever recommend an option where you could have a crossing at a light, which would be much safer versus crossing in front of a roundabout. And there's no reason to get across the street there, so there's no hurry for anybody to go there. As I said, you would want to have the option because there's a couple of people who live there, but other than those people, I think I'm not sure why you wouldn't extend it down. I mean, it seems like an opportunity for a really great. And then it said you're basically at Mitchell Park, so anybody who's going to Mitchell Park would cross the street there, and then the Waverly bike path is just beyond there.
If we can just hold the comments, Madam Clerk.
Yes, Chair, I just want to let you know that there are members of the public who are participating virtually that also would like to speak. So whenever you're ready, we can open the formal public comment section. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me know. Ms. Alexis?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. And this is one thing I am a little concerned about how we presented this project is I don't think it was one way I think you could make a more effective use of the bike ped committee is to show them different options for crossing and then ask what they like instead of think right now, because we said, oh, you're going to cross at this place, which I don't think is very safe. Obviously people respond very negatively to that, but I know that they have a lot of ideas about this.
I'd be happy to share that idea if you want.
Yes, a lot of ideas.
Sure. My name is Bruce Arthur. I'm on oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask you to please provide your name.
Sure. I'm Bruce Arthur.
And if you just give me, if you give me a minute, I'm going to let Madam Clerk open it up for public comments.
Thank you so much. Okay, just 1 second. I will just want to make sure everyone has the right opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Okay, so Bruce. Okay, Bruce, you can go ahead and make your public comment.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. The first thing I want to point out is thank you, Peter, for pointing out the 2-lane roundabout is particularly terrifying for cyclists. Those exist at Stanford to some extent, but they often have bypasses where the cyclists can go around another route. So those are that's a terrible design for a cyclist to go through there. Even if you think there's a bike path, there's through cyclists that are going to want to stay on the road. And when you have that, anyway, that's bad. So to get back to the other point of where do cyclists cross, the existing crosswalks on that design that you had up were actually pretty poor because they're right after the roundabout where people are going to be driving fast. So it's a particularly terrible place to put a crossing point. On the other hand, I have to be honest, I don't like this plan at all. And most of the bike committee did not either, because it requires the cyclists and the pedestrians to move across when they're not moving. Like if they're headed, oh God, if they're headed away from Middlefield towards Alma, it's on the proper side of the road. It's not a big deal. It's the people going the other direction for whom you're going to require them to cross Meadow and Charleston twice to get through that. That's a terrible idea. So where the crossing is, I mean, it's not a good place where it's on the map. You can move it to a better one. That's fine, but it's still a bad design. I think the objections would say the same. I don't think there's nothing moving the change to Charleston to not really radically improve that plan. It makes it a little bit safer, but the 2-lane roundabout. I also want to point out that I don't know that we want to optimize everything we're doing here for all cars and all the turning options. This is we want to make these roads safe for everybody to use, bikes and peds included, and sort of optimizing for high throughput of cars it's something we can do, but this is not. We don't want to turn this into a giant cloverleaf kind of operation. That's not good for the city. It's not good for the people who live here. Everyone wants a truck once in a while, but okay. Sorry, I'm getting off track. The 2-lane roundabout is terrifying. And moving the crosswalk is okay, but the design of moving all the people to one side of the street is not a good, not doesn't make cyclists and pedestrians happy, I'll be frank. Oh, there you go.
Thank you for your comments. Adrian Brandt, you can now unmute and speak for up to 3 minutes. Adrian, are you there? Okay, we'll come back to you in just a minute and see if you've come back. Rachel Croft, if you'd like to, you can make your comments now.
Hi, this is Rachel. Thank you so much. I wanted to make a comment on the Churchill discussion. The first, I went to the last meeting and I wasn't aware that the council had actually chosen the partial underpass, which what Nadia just stated. My understanding was that this exercise was to further explore the option and that XCAP recommended closure of Churchill. And as far as our community knows, here I live on Mariposa and Southgate, we weren't aware that the closure was no longer the option. So I just wanted to point that out, that there has not been much communication about this, and I do look out for communications on this topic. The next thing I wanted to say is I wanted to comment on the aesthetics that were discussed just now. They're really very important to the locals, and the removal of all trees on both sides of Alma will just be extremely depressing to me, and I imagine to many others. And in the early days, there was a recommendation. The first recommendation was to put the through northbound traffic along with the southbound lanes. So it dipped down and up, down to where Churchill came in. And there was a small side road that remained at grade, which would allow for the residents to enter their driveways on Alma and to turn right on Churchill. And if you would go back to this idea, I don't know the technical details of why it was trashed, but if you would go back to that idea, there might be some way to retain some of the trees, and it also would avoid that uncomfortable conversation you guys just had about putting the sidewalk literally right next to fast traffic going by, which also seems, not only the trees being gone, but that sidewalk being right there on the road just seems like a blight issue. It just seems really unattractive. So thinking about splitting the traffic, I know that was a discussion, like where the lanes split and one stays at grade and one goes down. It seems like a safety issue, but I think there are ways to overcome that with flexible barriers that warn people that it's going to split. So I just wanted to point out that that discussion of all of the foliage being removed completely and it turning into a big concrete construction, I think it'll really change the character of the neighborhood. Thanks for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you for your comments. Adrian Brandt, you can unmute and speak up to 3 minutes. Mr. Brandt, are you there? It appears he has stepped away. Vice Mayor Koo, Eric Holm from PGUSD also has his hand raised. So, but that's the end of our public speak.
Okay. Mr. Holm?
Hi, thank you. I'm not quite sure if this is the right time to speak, but the last speaker spoke about the church crossing. I just wanted to comment on some questions and or comments from last month's meeting regarding the Kellogg bike path and where it intersected the PAUSD property. The widening of the right-of-way to allow for ramps to get up via Kellogg would be right in the area of our bleachers for our ball field. So at the meeting last month, it was somewhat indicated that it might be in landscaping and it wouldn't be an issue. But from our understanding, it would require a complete relocation or removal of our bleachers, which is not feasible without redoing the entire football field and moving it. So we wanted to identify that the Kellogg has some serious space challenges that we don't think is viable given the infrastructure of the school site. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kami, so this is the verbal. Did you submit something to Palo Alto Unified School District for, what was that map that you called?
Thank you. Yeah, the dot maps. Yeah, staff is requesting dot maps, but I'm not sure that Mr. Holm is the correct contact for that, but we are reaching out to try and get the dot maps of where students live.
We will provide them.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Holm.
Yeah.
Okay. And if we're done with public comments, then we can move on to the next, unless staff has some comments to make to the comments on the public.
Councilmember Ku, this is Nadia Nick. I just had one comment / question. So the biggest advantage of this underpass design, as flawed as it is that it is the only that passes the traffic studies. So the trench, the hybrid, the viaduct leave Meadow and Charleston with a greater F intersection rating than the underpass would. And that is the only reason that really it is still alive. And part of the reason it has all the warts that it has. There was a lot of consternation on XCAP about the 2-lane roundabout. I know that that's what actually makes it work in the traffic study. I guess one of the questions I would have is it possible to reduce it to a 1-lane traffic circle and see if it still passes the traffic study? I see Ripon shaking his head no, but I'd love to get your comments on that, because that's the only other thing that I can think of that.
Thank you. I'm just pulling from my memory, but I remember that Gary Black had said that it fails with the 1-lane roundabout. So
then the question is, which fails worse? Think about, we had this conversation about what an F intersection is, right? I mean, I'm just saying. But otherwise, if you just heard the answer is that this is the only one that works, then part of the problem with this is I hear you that it's an awful design, and I hear for the bikers that it's not your first choice. The only reason it was looked at is because the only one that offers the bikes and pedestrians to not have to stop at Alma anymore. And that is actually a big deal. It's not a favorite for road bikers because of all the things that were said previously, but it is a huge deal to not have to have kids and bikes waiting at those Alma intersections in years to come as traffic only grows. So I just wanted to make sure that that was super clear as to why we're still looking at this thing.
Yeah, just to add to Philip's responses, that there was discussion about weaving length that is required in order to merge the traffic coming off from northbound Elma to the Charleston. So that distance is very limited, and therefore you definitely have to have, from the operational as well as from the mechanical perspective of the workings of the traffic, to have that 2-lane roundabout. That's what I remember from the ECAP discussions with the traffic consultant.
Thank you, Ripon. I just wanted anyone watching to, it's probably a question they're wondering, and I wanted to be sure that we sort of hit that again and make sure everyone really understands, because I'm sensitive to just hearing Rachel Croft, who lives in Southgate, who didn't understand that that a selection was already by council. And I looked it up and it was in November of last year. So, I mean, it speaks to the fact that we probably haven't done as much outreach as we kind of need to do as we keep going through this process. Just a reminder that we need to bring people along, even the things that we already know are the obvious answers when we have these kinds of meetings.
Chair, can I wade in?
Yes, sure.
So because we have Mr. Holm here, I wonder if we could go back and pull up from last month the impacts on the Valley side of the Kellogg crossing that we looked at, so that we can all see if we're on the same page.
I think it was this slide that you're referring to. Is that right?
I think so. So
So this was the recommended layout to avoid those conflicts, but it pushes the ramp, the whole configuration closer to the bleachers.
Closest to or encroaches?
It would encroach into the bleachers, yeah.
So I think I mentioned this last time, but I do believe that it is on part of the bleachers as they exist currently.
Just right there at the bottom left. Yeah, you can see the white.
Yeah. Can we pull back again?
So the corner of that picture,
Yeah, those bleachers go right up against the fence currently. So I was trying to figure out how we can continue to have the current bike path and this ramp, even if we didn't move the bleachers. So you're saying we have to move the bleachers to have the two. That's basically what.
Yeah. So this configuration here on the screen, the pink it moves the ramp on the track side of the bike, the Embarcadero bike path closer to the track, so it doesn't encroach any further onto bleacher side. So that's what we're trying to do here, is avoid the bleachers, but with this updated configuration, it would impact the bleachers.
Okay. Well, for me, that's another reason. And so just so everybody understands, if you can't remove these bleachers without moving the entire football field and the much larger bleachers on the opposite side. This is the visiting side bleachers. They're relatively small, but the big home field bleachers are on the other side, and be a complete layout, but move the whole track and field and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think just to hammer home what I think we're hearing, and just note that we're already considering this is another case for Seal versus Kellogg.
Right.
Just to acknowledge that that's what we said last time on this same item for PAUSD's edification.
Okay. So then from a process standpoint, do we as a committee need to make a recommendation to the council on focusing on Seal rather than Kellogg for the bike and bed?
So just to reiterate what I said last time as well on this, and noting that this is caused by the redesign of this bike ped path, not through the previous conceptual design, but through the reconfigured bike ped path, which was something that was identified from the payback. But as mentioned previously, we're collecting data. As Eric Holm added, he would provide the dot maps. We're doing that. We're doing an initial analysis under our BPTP, which will help us to determine. We believe that we'll have that information fairly soon in order to make a decision about Kellogg versus Seal. So I don't believe at this time we need anything else.
Okay. And so do we want to make sure that we're agendized in December in a way that would enable us, if we have adequate information at that time, to referral to council, so that we don't continue to spend money pursuing a dead horse?
So I think we're already prepared to make a concept for Seal. So I don't think we need any additional direction at this time. Noting that, as Ripon mentioned earlier, I think we need the item this week for our December rail committee. So we're not going to have anything new between now and then the end of today that's could make that agenda.
All right. And the other issue on to Charleston, and whether there's any way that we could move to a one-lane roundabout. So we've kind of offered the conclusion that one lane doesn't work, but I don't know that we've seen kind of really the basis for that. And would one lane roundabout still be a better option than the other ones that are level F at the Charleston Alma interchange?
So I think, as Ripon had mentioned, and I completely forgot about this, but I think because of the merge and the length that's leading up to the roundabout, our traffic consultant had told us not only that it fails, but also that we needed it for the room to merge.
Yeah, I recall that merge issue, and that may be correct, but I kind of recall it as more of a subjective decision, that it's a tight merge. And I'd be interested in other comparisons on that.
So,
go ahead, Phil.
I was just going to say that I also want to note this can be something that's evaluated further as, this alternative. If this alternative progresses, that could be the kind of thing that could be looked at to see whether it's possible.
And
I'm sorry, I didn't know if Peter was.
I'm not concluding that in my own mind that one lane roundabout will work. What I want to do is see if there's any way it can work, because it also would impact the property takings too.
If I'm remembering correctly, the traffic was going to spill onto Alma from Charleston because of that merging was just going to be a complete standstill. So that's what I'm recalling from Gary Black. And yeah, just noting that I see that we have a member of the public with their hands raised, but I just also want to mention to the committee that if we take I'm not sure how it works with public comment. I'm just going to be really frank about it, because I think if we take a member of the public comment, we need to open it up for all public comments. So just
Well,
noting. that.
actually, no, we as council members can request through the chair or the member of the public respond to questions. So that's what I like to do. Chair, can I ask for Ms. Alexis to give any feedback she has on this one lane option and related issues?
Right. So, I mean, I think,
Okay.
just a second.
Is that fine, Vice Chair? We lose her? All right, let's go ahead.
Just really quickly, I think though, I mean, going back, we have this real issue with whether these other options work. So we need to see if this does work. People are really, I don't think you can kick this down the road about whether you need 2 lanes or 1, and people need to know what it is. I would say that we should take the approach that we're in a constrained environment and go backwards and kind of see what we would have to change to make 1 lane work. Like, so is this a place where maybe don't make the whole intersection 20 miles an hour, but if we had a slightly steeper slope, could we get the cars up sooner to merge? I know people don't like this idea of limiting, not having a dedicated right-hand turn lane. Maybe we want to stack cars on Alma instead of stacking them on Charleston. What if we start to adjust the light signals that we have up at Carlson and that we have at Wilkie Way and at East Met or wherever else, all these different light signals? What would have to be true to make it not be a complete nightmare with 1 lane? And if there just is no combination that's acceptable, then it's 2 lane. And I think people could understand that, and you have to make a choice. The other question I would have is, this isn't really a roundabout, right? It's a turnaround facility, because it's not like you have 4 different things coming in and all this kind of stuff. Could it also be, is there a combination of, getting this merge done a little faster on Charleston, Rostradero? The concept of the road is short merges all over the place. So I'm not sure if we've really compared how short distances that we're using in other places. People are actually used to doing short merges here. They're getting trained to do that. Could you make it feel less like a 2-way roundabout and more like a really lengthy 1-way? I'm saying, I think though we need to do our best to see if we find a way to make this something that's more acceptable. And if it's not, it's not. I just don't see how we can, but that means pushing on all these different levers.
Okay, thank you. And the one thing that gave me pause to think again is that's right. There are no entrances from the right or the left side into this roundabout. So it's really a turnabout. And I just want to make sure that when the traffic flow was looked at that way, we aren't comparing the flow on a true roundabout where traffic's coming from 4 directions versus one where it's coming only from 2. And I don't know the answer to that, but I just want to make sure that's the case. If we're working, once again, if we go back and say, look, we really want to see if there's any way a 2-lane would work, as opposed to ruling out at the front end. And the answer may be there isn't. But just kind of.
Yeah, I think so. If I can take a stab at this, I think what staff's recommendation would be is to keep consideration of ways to reduce the size of the roundabout, if possible, in future phases. Just wanted to note something really quickly for regarding Ms. Alexis's comments regarding the slope, is that when and if we increase the slope, and I know we had this slope discussion already, but a bicyclist that's coming from the other side, and it might not just be a vehicular cyclist, it could be a high school student that would need to cross the street multiple times in order to get to the correct side of the street. And so just noting that if they didn't want to do that, which sometimes students are known to do, they're sometimes known to take the shortest path, they might actually ride under that underpass as a vehicle. And so that's something to consider as we're thinking about what the slope will be in these underpasses. And of course, the other side to that is you could have a bike ped path on both sides, as we talked about, but then that we talked about, or we will talk about. Sorry. but noting that that will restrict movement. So we'll get to that, I guess.
One other
I might have
thing.
a moment.
Sorry.
Oh, I just want to say that, it's 3:32 and I would like to finish the study session today since it was continued from last time to finish up. So if we can limit the public comments, Ms. Alexis spoke because she is one of the, she is the designer of this plan. So wanted to give her opportunity to give her point. Mayor Burt?
Just one last thing. I don't recall whether we looked at two separate bike and ped underpasses, one on, we'll call it the north side, and the other on the south side of the, yeah. That
So we
might not-
actually
Talked
did, but
about
you,
last time.
you can't
Yeah.
make you can't make a right turn onto Charles. So major
All
traffic
right.
movements would be inhibited, specifically the one that is the evening
Yeah.
commute.
Right. Okay, thanks. Sorry.
That's right. Sorry, that's the turning movements.
Vice Mayor, may I?
Oh, yes. Okay.
Okay, so just two things with this. It always helps to sort of sit and look at these slides for a while. With respect to the turnabout, makes me like we're doing a dance. I guess one thing I hadn't appreciated is if you look at the bottom of that circle, very few people will be driving from the left to the right. Unless, I mean, I don't know anybody who would come that way and make a U-turn, right? So it'll be easier for the second merge, the merge onto the turnabout. If you're coming, this looks like north. If you're coming east on Charleston, no matter whether you want to go straight or turn around and get underneath Alma, there'll be very little traffic coming from the left. That's something I hadn't appreciated until I sat here and sort of looked at all of this. So I think that helps a little bit. I don't know how much it addresses the 1 or 2 lane, but that should help traffic flow. And then what's this pink triangle down on Eli Place?
Yeah,
Oh, over here.
this is intended to prevent the.
That's just what cut through traffic?
Yeah.
Yeah, if it would be a right turn movement only from Alma to Alma Street. So just to prevent any traffic to make a right turn.
Right, that,
Sorry, I'm coming north on Alma and I live somewhere on Eli Place or somewhere over there. I cannot turn right.
that's correct. Yeah, so
So they're going to have to go all the way up and through that and then turn right on Mumford and wind their way back.
That's right. And the reason for that is as traffic in the roundabout starts to back up, this queue will start to back up here.
Yeah, well, the secondary reason is anybody looking at that would be like, I'm just going to turn right on Eli Place and make my way through this really lovely little neighborhood and just
Yeah,
avoid this whole
Exact
thing.
cut through traffic. So
Okay.
because of that queue, the concern is that there'd be cut through traffic that would skip the going all the way around in the roundabout in order to head
Yeah.
north or
Okay.
east.
Earlier we had a public comment about like, what are we optimizing for? And, as I've said 100 times, that's what we really have not as a council and a city like committed to. So is it we're optimizing for vehicles and making sure that it works, bicycles and pedestrians, or is it something else? And it feels to me like it's always been the former, and that might be appropriate, but it's a legitimate question. And it really gets at, which alternative we choose in this area and why. So excruciating as it is, I appreciate this level of detail and staff's and our consultants, clearly thoughtful. And I know I talked about this last time with the worksheet, like, taking into consideration this and walking through, even just going back, looking at all the different, levels. That's a great slide to show people like, well, we can't make it cheaper because then it goes down too far. Well, we could make it flatter, but then it extends. So I just want to say I appreciate this level of detail. And at some point, we're going to have to up level it a bit to explain it to people who, like Ms. Croft, who is very involved and, missed an announcement, which is completely understandable. So just thanks. Oh, and Chair Koo, just while I have the floor, I do have a hard stop at 4. So as I mentioned last time.
Is that my cue to continue?
Yes, please.
I think we've got about 5 more slides here. So let's see if we get through these. I think I'm on slide 24. Okay. There was there's been stakeholder concerns about breaking the north-south continuity for bicyclists at Park Boulevard. So the road starts to descend here on Meadow. This is Meadow, for example, just west of Park. So because of the elevation differences, bicyclists won't be able to make that through movement across Park. So if, for example, if you're heading up Park, a bicyclist would have to make the right turn, head up on a path on a slight incline, and then get on a bridge over Meadow and then come back in the other direction to kind of make that U movement, that circuitous movement to get across Park. So there was really two suggestions to maybe improve this, that to remove that circuitous movement. One was to realign Park like this, kind of wrap around the conform point. So that would allow the north-south continuity. And then there was, going back to the previous slide where we talked about steep grades and reducing the footprint. There was also a suggestion of steepening the grades to get this purple line for the conform point, get closer to Park. So again, allow for that north-south continuity. And we've already gone through that, and we don't think that that's a good idea. So getting back to this alignment, that would have impacts to the properties along here, obviously. So, So we are recommending, our recommendations here is to keep the configuration as is, to minimize property acquisitions, and then also to keep the grade as is, using a design of 25 miles per hour for the reasons we described on slide 20. About balancing safety, cost, and design speed.
I think another suggestion that was made by XCAP was to move the bike boulevard from Park Boulevard to the next through intersection, which runs east-west, which I don't recall on my Google, Wilkie Way, exactly. And then that helps, because the reason that Park Boulevard is such a concern is that it's the bike boulevard, but that's somewhat changeable. And Wilkie Way actually already has some other interesting movements that connect to some of the other underpasses, I believe, that we've thought about for pets. I don't know if we have a map to pull that out so people can visualize.
Well, and there's the bridge at the end, right? A Wilkie further south. Sorry, did XCAP recommend moving or just sort of come down Park and then sort of dogleg over to Wilkie?
The idea was you'd have to look at it as part of the bike network and what makes sense. But if those are the only alternatives at Park Boulevard, is that it's going to be impacted by the cars coming out of Meadow and Charleston's intersections, then moving it to Wilkie Way would just probably solve all of those issues. Because it touches Meadow, and I believe if you scroll, it's the same down by Charleston, right? If you move a little bit to the. So see if you move to.
Just noting, I believe that you cannot, not that you cannot, but that you cannot have Wilkie completely replace Park Boulevard. I mean, it would just shift it for a segment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
no, yeah, but like Tennessee or Carolina, then it would be Wilkie Way going south, right?
yeah, I mean, Wilkie would continue all the way into the Monroe neighborhood. And
Seems
the
like a
bike
good
range that
idea.
goes into Monroe neighborhood. And so you wouldn't go back to Park. Because Park.
North.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no, we were just talking about from. Yeah.
Sorry, and just for edification of anybody listening, I was saying the north end of Wilkie.
Got it. Well, and Wilkie only continues for one block because the creek there. Northbound. Yeah.
Okay, if we're done with this, we can continue.
You're up.
All right, so our next slide, topic's already been mentioned a little bit today about the bridge depth thickness. Our concept designs are based on a structure depth that is 10% of the span length, so the length of the bridge, and that's a pretty good rule of thumb for conceptual design. So for example, if our span length was 50 feet, then we assume that the bottom of the bridge is assumed to be 5 feet, so you have a 5-foot structure depth. There's been suggestions to try to start fine-tuning that structure depth to reduce the project footprint. I mean, we understand that 10% is slightly conservative. There's other examples on the corridor where, like Holly Street that's shown here, where the depth to span ratio is closer to 7.5%. But that's, what it ended up being. additional depth that you have now allows some flexibility as you make decisions on all these future design things. So maybe your span ends up being a little bit longer than you planned for, or there's some uncertainties about we don't have detailed survey, right? So the rail might be a little higher, the road a little lower. So it's just our rule of thumb that we use at this level of design. And so we recommend keeping that as is, and then the depths can be refined as you move forward in the subsequent phases of the project design.
When you say the greater bridge depth creates flexibility, but doesn't it also restrict flexibility? Because it means that, for instance, we have to accommodate a further setback of the grade, so that reduces flexibility.
Right, but it also makes the situation where you're kind of like, you would make improvements upon it, right? It wouldn't get worse as your design moves forward, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the balancing of the trade-offs there. Is you could design for the most optimal situation, and then you have you're hoping that maybe the bridge depth thickness can be, what you want, and it doesn't become that, and then it has other impacts, or vice versa.
What would prevent it from being the thinner depth? Why couldn't we do that?
It depends on your whole structure type and what you select to be as your structure type. That impacts it significantly.
So if we say we want to select a structure type that will minimize our bridge depth thickness from the get-go, we say that's an objective. We're very constrained in the corridor. So we say, okay, bridge depth matters to us because we want to minimize that. So what keeps us from just setting that as a starting point condition that we want to select the bridge construction method that will minimize the bridge depth?
I say that, go ahead, Peter. I mean, that's not the normal.
Why not?
I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that, like the geotechnical conditions and other things. And as you evolve your design, that's how you make those
The bridge
choices.
depth is influenced by the geotechnical
Get the
aspects?
type of structure that you pick sometimes, yes.
Yeah, just to expand on that a little bit, we want to allow for a little bit of flexibility further on the design. For example, like what Millette said, let's say, for example, we wanted to accommodate maybe a little bit extra width for the shoulder or the lane, underneath the bridge. So let's say in further in design, we want to make a 50-foot long bridge be 55 feet. But we also maybe in further in design, reducing the bridge depth, we wouldn't have to touch the road profile. What we'd assume for the road profile, which, dictates all the property impacts. We kind of what Philip is saying, we don't want to make the design and the impacts worse as we move forward. So this is a little bit conservative, but it gives us like Millette said, the flexibility to fine tune the design further on without having to revamp everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but alternately, if we had, here's a scenario with a bridge depth that we think is feasible. It's not pie in the sky. And what would be the impacts of that? What would be the favorable impacts if we reduce the bridge depth? And what we haven't been able to do, and you see that we're struggling with different aspects of this that would potentially be influenced by the bridge depth. We haven't been able to see how much that would matter to us in some of these critical things. So it could be, we have a range. I know that we don't want to go through and do advanced design on everything with two different bridge depths. I think we have certain things that we could just look and say, well, it pulls forward the point at which we have to begin the underpass, and it pulls forward the point at which we emerge. How valuable would that be?
Yeah, Ripon brought up a good point. Just to clarify, the depth we're talking about is from top of rail to the bottom of the bridge, or bottom, what we call the soffit. Again, I think we recommend keeping that as is for reasons, again, what expand on what Millette said, we don't have the top of rail surveyed, we don't have the road surveyed, we have a pretty good approximation of the elevations. So I think we're trying to thread a needle here to some degree there's really no need to.
And if I can also, I think that we can have that same aspirational you know, as you mentioned, there are a lot of benefits. So we can have a lot of that aspirational goal of having the depth thickness reduced as much as possible. You know, doing the one span, doing the, you know, metal, whatever we need to do in order to do that. So we can have that as aspirational. Typically that would be done further along in the process. So typically in this part of the process, you kind of try to take the middle of the road. Like it could actually be worse. It could be thicker, or it could
Is that
be
really true though? It could be thicker than this? Or
depending-
have we taken the upper end here?
I think depending on what we find from the geotechnical, depending on the type of construction that needs to be used, yes. So I wouldn't say that this is necessarily the most absolutely most conservative, but I think that it's somewhere in the middle of where.
Do we have examples on the corridor where they've had to build greater bridge depth than we're using?
Yeah, so this example here at Holly,
Yeah.
this is probably the best. When I say best, I mean the shallowest depth that I've seen along the corridor.
Yeah, but
So
what's the
we're-
greatest depth that we have?
I think it ranges from maybe like 9% of the span. So again, we want to provide a little bit of.
I'm sorry, and we're at what?
Maybe 8-9% of the span depth. So we're using 10, it's slightly conservative. Again, if you really look at the difference between 9 and 10%, let's say a 50-foot span, you know, we're talking maybe a half a foot or so. That gives us the flexibility for any inaccuracies with our assumed elevations moving forward. A city doesn't want to come back to the council 2 years from now and say, oh, well, we underestimated some things. We're going to require more property than we initially
So,
told you.
and I wasn't suggesting that we switch to the more optimum depth. It was, are there certain things where we want to look right at the outset of what would it gain us where we're really struggling with real estate if we had a shallower depth, not to do a full engineering design on it, but okay, this would have a consequential impact, or no, it really doesn't matter very much.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was going at. That's what I meant by thread the needle. We're trying to fine tune it to like the nth degree where it's really not going to be much of a difference. Like a 6-inch difference probably isn't going to really.
But a 2 foot?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If you start talking a couple feet, yeah, that could.
Yeah.
That could make
And
a
the other thing is that we're not talking about raising the railway bed at all. And, you know, we don't really call it a hybrid if we raise it 1 or 2 feet, but if you have a thinner bridge depth and raise it 2 feet, you might have some real impacts.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And I just want to have a sense of what those impacts might be, where places where we're really struggling.
So
Can I just try to connect the dots? Is your concern that on the west side of Park Boulevard, if we have this narrower bridge, we can come back up more quickly and not have to worry about this? I'm just trying to, we're having a lot of discussion about things that I think are hard for other people to follow.
That's one example of not only if you have a narrower bridge, but if you raise the tracks a foot or two, does that really solve a problem? And I don't know whether it solves a problem.
So just to note, and correct me if I'm incorrect on this, but I think that if we're talking about, and frankly, that is a hybrid if we're raising the tracks.
No, technically, we have places where we have tracks at Churchill that are actually elevated. Don't call it a hybrid.
Right, but for a design of a new grade crossing, it is
the hybrid that we've talked about is a wall like we have in San Carlos, and raising 1 or 2 feet. I don't visualize that as a hybrid. Technically, I get you, but it's
right. So I'm not that I'm trying to use the technicality, but I'm just trying to note that it would take more than just significant refinement of the concepts, and that's really the point that I'm trying to make. That said, we have the recommendation to keep the assumed depth as is, but if the rail committee believes that we need to investigate either the thinner bridge deck thickness or that hybrid type of alternative, that's just noting that's a really significant refinement that we would need to make at this stage when we're not deciding construction type and figuring out all the geotechnical stuff that would be necessary to make that determination.
Is there any other comments? And this So this alternative is still being considered, but not determined to be the alternative, to be the path forward. So I would say leave it open for consideration as phases of the project comes up. So that's my my comment to it. This side. If there's nothing else, then on to the next.
And I just want to acknowledge that we're noting that as aspirational goal of, reducing the impacts of the length of the roadway being reduced and frankly, property impacts from that.
Okay.
All right, the next one here is about vertical clearance, and there's been some suggestion about reducing the vertical clearance to help with the project footprint, which is a recurring theme. The roadway vertical clearance that we have is the vertical clearance required by Caltrain is 5 feet 6 inches. So exceptions for clearance under the roadway at Meadow, Charleston, 15 foot 6 inches is the Caltrain minimum vertical clearance. Except for the clearance under the railroad bridge for Meadow Underpass, which has a tight geometric constraint, all the ped bike vertical clearances are 10 feet. And that is Caltrain's design manual describes that as the desirable vertical clearance. So our recommendation is to keep the vertical clearances as is, because that's the meets the standards. What does that do to the slope of the bike path?
If I can, these numbers actually come from Caltrans. So actually the 15 foot 6 inches also is a Caltrans driven number. So I was on a conference call with the Caltrain folks this morning. It's actually 16 feet 5 inches for expressways and county roads, but for local streets it's 15.6. So in this slide where it says it's Caltrain standards, it's actually, they both come from Caltrans.
Yeah,
Is it Caltrain or Caltrans?
They're driven, so Caltrain has in their design numbers, but they really come from the recommendation of Caltrans, the transportation highway design.
And do we have to follow Caltrans, the transportation folks?
Yes.
I think we're gonna have to follow what Caltrain says. So if their guidance is based on Caltrans, then that's what we're gonna use. I think there's really no flexibility with the roadway vertical clearance. There may be some flexibility with the pedestrian vertical clearance. Caltrans is, they recommend 10 feet, or they say 10 feet is desirable, but 8 feet is minimum. So there is flexibility to reduce those clearances, but not the road clearances.
Yeah, and I don't even know why 10 feet is there on the bike and ped. Most tunnels I'm in aren't that tall. Yeah. So I'm very inclined to give us that flexibility.
Oh, you got one.
How many more slides do we have? Okay.
We have 2 more of the.
Okay.
And then there's some discussion afterwards, but we'll be really quick here. This one's related to aesthetics, and there were some suggestions to enhance the aesthetics of the alternatives as shown in the renderings. This is a photo of Holly Street underpass, which has generally been well received as from an architectural standpoint. And while aesthetics of an alternative can improve it, we recommend keeping them as it is. So it's likely not a deciding factor in whether you would select preferred alternative or not. After you select your preferred alternative, then you can go through those iterations of updating the renderings to meet the aesthetics that the city wishes.
Okay, if there's no comments or questions. Did Councilmember Cormack say something?
Nope. But I will be leaving in 2 minutes. I'll just let you know, and that way I don't have to interrupt later.
Okay. So if there's nothing else,
Sorry, go ahead.
we can move forward.
Okay,
We can move forward if there's nothing else.
excellent. All right, slide 28, the last one here. Someone suggested raising the rail profile, as Mayor Bird has alluded to earlier, to reduce the extent of the roadway lowering, which would potentially reduce the project footprint and reduce the grades. And we acknowledge that there's certainly some benefit and advantages to doing that. But one key reason why we kept the rail at the existing elevation for these underpass alternatives was allow for the possibility of alternative construction techniques such as box jacking, which was used on the Long Island Railroad in New York. So that the benefit of that could potentially avoid the need for the shoe fly tracks, which would be very expensive. So we're recommending no change to the rail profile for these underpass options for the following reasons. Leaves open that possibility of alternative construction techniques, and really a side reason is, there's other issues with the Meadow and Charleston underpass that are expressed by the payback, for example, about the path being on one side of the road. So raising the rail really wouldn't address those other issues. So we're recommending keeping the rail profile as is.
Okay, unless there's any comments or questions on this, I can get into the kind of summary of what we'll do with the refinements. Just noting it appears we're losing Councilmember Cormack right now. Can we get
Thank you, Councilmember Cormack.
Yeah, next slide, please. So just to go down this list really quickly, and just noting that I don't, I'll say this on the next slide, but I don't think we need direction on this. We can probably proceed unless there's any issue with this. These are under council direction. We were to collect feedback and to proceed with design refinements, the underpass alternative. So just meaning the first one, the bike ped path, I think we should refine that to the 12 feet within the existing right of way, but also want to highlight the note that we had at the beginning of the meeting that, this will likely impact the landscaping strip. I don't believe there was a real desire to proceed with the bike ped study at this time, noting what we discussed regarding how much of the build on bicyclists is caused by the existing traffic signals that would go away with underpass alternatives. The slopes at 5%, I believe the current status would be to leave them as is, but to review and revise potentially in a future phase. The Kellogg ramp revision, we would proceed with, noting that's the Kellogg ramp revision that impacts the PAUSD bleachers. We'll proceed with that as a concept, but also noting that we're developing the seal concept, and we're reviewing the dot map that we'll be receiving soon from PAUSD, and also the BPTP will be looking at seal as a possibility. So we'll be developing a concept for seal. We have next. I have this in my notes, but we'll evaluate removing the column support at Churchill and reviewing the shoulder width based on turning movements. And then the new underpass alternative that provides bike path on each side of the street, noting this would be additional scope. I didn't get a sense that there was a strong desire to create that, but I want to make sure that that's in my understanding, that's not a refinement that we'd want to make to the alternative.
So which one?
So that would be the Charleston Meadow underpass, separating the bike path onto each side of the street, which, as Elizabeth Alexis noted for her alternative, I'm sorry, it might have been Nadia, noted that there's traffic impacts to that because of the turning movements that we limited through that. And I don't know, Nadia.
It would break the traffic model. The only reason that traffic model works is because you can, coming on eastbound Charleston, you could make a right turn onto southbound Alma. And if you make it so that you now have a bike ped crossing on that side, you couldn't make that movement, which breaks the model. So the whole thing would fail. So you would not want to spend any money on it, in my opinion.
And then the last one, I believe, unless I missed any of them, is the landscaping strip, that buffer between the back of the curb and sidewalk, which I believe there was some support for us to do in the refinements. So with that, we can.
Yeah, the only one that, going back to Kellogg, I think you said that we continue to review it. I'd recommend that we don't do any work pending the dot maps. And unless the dot maps show it's the superior location, we don't proceed on Kellogg.
Okay. I'm wondering if, well, this is what I would say is, in order to not have a, noting that we're not seeking a recommendation here or a formal recommendation, we could hold on the refinement of that until we determine seal.
If I could just add, or actually ask a question about what the order is of exactly what's coming. So is the idea that you've gathered all this feedback, then AECOM will put together an estimate of what it would cost to do all of these refinements and they come back, or are they going ahead with the refinements, or how does that, and then how does that interlace with the fact that Caltrain is looking at their technical requirements? So I was on a phone call this morning and the early indication is that they might come out with something at least as early as February that starts to talk about the things at least that they're aware of. And so I have questions about whether that, how that changes any of our alternatives, specifically some of the other alternatives that we didn't actually talk about.
Thank you. So that's something I was going to address on the next slide. I'm sorry, your first question, I think I need.
They're just going to start drawing stuff, or they go
yes,
back to
okay.
council?
So that is the contract that we currently have with AECOM to do these design refinements. So that is what we currently have them under contract to do. So pending our understanding, we could initiate that after this meeting, initiate the refinements. Now, the next that second part I'll discuss on the next slide, I think is relevant. So seek direction. So noting this slide was from the last rail committee meeting, so it says 1019. But just I think so, as I noted on the previous slide, the council direction was to proceed with the stakeholder feedback and to refine the designs. And so without any additional scope, we can proceed. Just to provide a bit of timeline, because I think this is all, this is a key to this and really into the next steps. We're currently developing the updated plans, exhibits, and renderings for the underpass alternatives, as was directed by the city council. And so that's what this process of discussion was. We also have AECOM working on geotechnical studies for reviewing the subsurface conditions to evaluate the feasibility of the proposed trenching, overhead, underpass, jack box alternatives. And also we have a peer review cost estimate and design assumptions for that trench alternative going on. And then upon the completion of these tasks, which would be, and of course, this is where it gets heavily caveated, but we would anticipate that we could complete all of this by summer of 2023, at which time Rail Committee could review and recommend preferred alternatives for the other crossings to City Council. But as I mentioned, caveat to this all is what Nadia was mentioning earlier regarding the technical issues and design criteria that's still pending. So, for example, our request to Caltrain to find out about tracking, which really could inform, refinements to these things and potentially expand costs or change costs for different alternatives and all that. So, I guess the bottom line here, and of course, this is not something that's agendized for today, but at some point, the committee needs to make a determination, I guess, in the future regarding whether we will proceed with the information that we have currently, that's currently available, or if we want to extend the timeline in order to wait for Caltrain's criteria, which, as Nadia said, could be coming as soon as February. Yeah, maybe, and I think Mayor Burt mentioned that maybe some fraction of that. So we might not get all of the information we want in February, or we might not get any of it in February based on previous timelines. But I also want to note that Caltrain wants to discuss a service agreement with us at the next meeting. So with that, sorry to scroll back, but I think, we wanted to make sure that we shared everything we heard from stakeholders, and this was really, significant effort. And I just want to thank Ripon for all of his hard work on this, and AECOM for their hard work on this, into collecting all this, putting it together, and making a cohesive way to share. And it's, as you've seen, this is spilled into 2 full lengthy rail committee meetings. And I think we have some really useful feedback on the refinements, which we can proceed with. But yeah, noting that some of these alternatives can be impacted, frankly, by Caltrain's responses.
Well, do we really need to identify which of those are prospectively by Caltrain responses, and see whether we need to attempt to get more alignment there? We're saying some things from Caltrain we may hear from sooner, some things that we're looking at proceeding on could be impacted by those. So do we need to say, okay, here are the design standards that are being looked at, and here are the ones that look like they might matter one way or another a bunch to us. And before making the decision on exactly what to proceed on, we try to map that out a little bit. And that could be also that we, with a targeted discussion with Caltrain as a result, we say, hey, these 2 are really important to us. Can you give us some indication, even if before you publish your full standard? And on that basis, we might give the go ahead to do next steps with AECOM, or if they say we don't think we're going to budge there, then we that helps clarify too what we would do next. It's a little chicken and egg problem. I think it's starting with, here are the ones that we think matter most to us, and then we can maybe hold that discussion with Caltrain.
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable. I was glancing away because I noticed that we have an attendee with their hand raised. So I do think we'll have to take public comment at the end of this. But yeah, I think the Caltrain's, we've got Caltrain coming to our next meeting. They're planning to talk to us about getting into an agreement for them to start looking at our alternatives. So we do have an engaged Caltrain group that wants to talk with us. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it there.
Is it going to be limited to just the agreement? Because, I think that we've been waiting for quite a long time. And as you can see, decisions are kind of in flux because we don't have all the answers from them. And realizing that they do have to formulate and analyze all of the standards in order to come back with something, it's just taken a long time.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And just noting that we also shared that with Caltrain staff, that, we had some frustration that we've been asking for them to come get involved, all of that. And then, there's been delay. This is new staff that we have been working with now. Just to answer your question, I don't think that they're going to come with anything regarding the corridor wide strategy at this meeting. It's going to be completely to talk about the service agreement that they want to establish with us in order to move forward with selecting LPA. And
they want an MOU and we want answers.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you need from us, Stephanie?
Yeah, so I don't think that we have no action today. So I guess we're just trying to get a sense with whether we should proceed with refinements at this time, or whether we should wait for Caltrain. And this is really a decision for the rail committee, is if they want us to proceed with design refinements at this time, or whether we want to wait for Caltrain to move on their schedule. Just noting that that's going to delay all of the things that we currently have scheduled. So.
Well, I'd like to see that kind of mapping of which design refinements matter most to us, And then we can have a discussion with Caltrain, and it can be, doesn't have to be in this meeting, but we just zero in and say, look, you guys are holding us up, and we're gonna potentially spend money in the wrong direction if we can't get some sense from you. And they may be willing to give us a sense of where they're headed before they give an official position.
Yeah, well, just to share that we've mentioned this to them many times, the different things that we believe are holding the city up, including formally by letter. But
I want to map it out in terms of this thing matters here.
Yep, I completely understand what you're saying.
I would just highlight for you guys that it might take Caltrain longer to answer you about the 4 tracks for South Palo Alto than it will for Churchill, even though as council you have opted to prioritize Meadow and Charleston above Churchill. And so part of this is perhaps having a visualization of if we can't move forward on these things, then we should move forward on those. But I mean, as an ex-XCAP person and understanding how expensive it is to design some of these things, there's also some hesitation because even some of the refinement that we have for the Churchill underpass has encroachments, if I remember, on the Caltrain right away, which we may not want to do if we end up in an MOU with Caltrain and then they tell us that's actually not at all possible and your design fails, or that sounds fabulous and you're a go, in which case you might prioritize Churchill first because Meadow and Charleston may take a while. I mean, there's a lot at play, but it would be helpful to have a really good sense of what impacts which design and understand that you may have to take them in a different order.
Thanks for saying that, Nadia, because you're absolutely right. One of the key ones that's on my mind, apart from fortracking, is the Caltrain right of way, and my expectation that they'll be very protective of that right of way, and that our designs are requiring some Caltrain right of way.
So definitely we can develop a list
Okay.
of all those items that are like the 5 or 6 different items that we have, and look at how those are applicable in each of the grade, and like have a matrix develop that can provide us like which ones.
And we want to remember that the bike path behind Pali is in the Caltrain right away.
And when is the geotechnical stuff expected? I mean, it would probably be helpful for the decision makers to understand exactly when we're expecting large chunks of work that's already been asked for, so that you can then agendize appropriately starting next year. Since it sounds like we're talking about January because you won't have time at the next meeting to let them give you a decision.
Yeah, thank you. That was what I was saying earlier, that the tasks that I'd mentioned earlier were expected to be completed by summer of 2023. Yes, including the geotechnical, but knowing also that one of those tasks is the refinements of these alternatives. So just noting that there is some chicken and egg there.
Okay, and I really appreciate Rippon's offer of matrix. I think that will help a lot. But as we come to a close, before we close, we do have a public comment. Madam Clerk.
Yes, Ms. Chair. Adrian Brandt, if you would like to make your comments, you can unmute and speak for up to 3 minutes.
Thank you. I think I missed an opportunity earlier. I was multitasking. So this comment goes to the buffer sidewalk question you had taken up earlier in the meeting. I definitely feel very strongly that having 35-mile-an-hour traffic, which we all know goes more than 35 because that's only the speed limit, passing right by the shoulders and feet of people that are on the sidewalk is totally something to avoid. We can find examples of it in existence, but it's a completely hostile and non-usable sidewalk. So I recommend a wall, a short wall that's just tall enough to prevent errant vehicles from driving up on the sidewalk, from climbing that curb, and but it's low enough so that recycling containers still be grabbed by pickup people, and then you can still have openings for aprons. So that's what I urge there. Mayor Burt's comments about the bridge thickness are very well taken, at least by myself. Even 6 inches at 1% grade, 6 inches takes 50 feet at 1% grade of ramping distance. So if you can shave 6 inches off, which is absolutely minimal, that's 50 feet on either side. That's 100 feet less of from end-to-end project distance. And of course, if you can get 1 foot off, then it's obviously 200 feet, 100 on either side. So those feet really matter on bridge thicknesses. And in terms of not being able to figure out in advance if you can do a thin bridge, I don't understand that whatsoever. If you look at the Dunbar Rail Bridge over Highway 101, just south of Marsh Road, that is a through truss bridge, and it just sits on concrete supports. And those can be just tucked in, and they're extremely thin from top of rail to bottom, the soffit. So that's just one example, but there's absolutely no conceivable reason why that can't be an upfront design constraint, as Mayor Burke suggested. So let's see, and then I had one other two. Oh yeah, so let's see, grades. Gosh, now I forgot what other. All right, well, I apologize. I had some other point. Oh yeah, and my last point was, I'll remind you, and if it isn't completely obvious, that the bulk of this entire meeting and the prior meeting and all these issues with shoe fly and grades and traffic movement and property takings, all in service of avoiding elevating the tracks on a viaduct. So largely everything you're talking about in this meeting and all these refinements and problems of rerouting bike paths, who can go where, those largely go away with a viaduct. So I would urge you to continue not completely ruling that out. I believe AECOM said a viaduct could actually avoid a shoe fly for South Palo Alto area. And then lastly, I remember for Adobe Creek, they did raise the tax. I was riding the train at that time, and they raised it just by adding ballast and lifting the tracks progressively. And it's actually not a very difficult procedure. They didn't shut down the railroad. It was for the Adobe Creek flood control project. So I remember that very well. All right, thanks.
All right, thank you so much for your comments. Madam Chair, that's the last request to speak.
Okay, thank you. And if we don't, I just want to ask Mr. Kami if we can chat later about what the next agenda is going to look like for the December meeting. And I do want to thank everybody for this study session. It was very, very helpful. And I do feel that the community does need to be more involved in this, especially the people who live near all of that, all of this construction and these changes. They need to provide their input and feedback and know what's going on. And I also appreciate Mr. Kami for realizing and for recognizing that those of us who are online can't see the facial expressions, and also providing clarity towards what we're talking about. I think with that, we're adjourned. Thank you so much.